Good morning and welcome to the public hearing and public meeting of the February 14th of 2023, Valentine's Day. This is the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and we'll begin this morning by taking attendance. So I'll ask our Deputy Counsel John Weiss to call the roll.
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire. Commissioner Goldblum. Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Holford Smith. Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome again to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of February 14th, 2023. We are going to begin this morning's agenda with a public meeting for two proposals from the research department for designation, for which we are to consider a vote to calendar for future consideration. And then that will be followed by our preservation department agenda, which will include public meeting and public hearing items for work on designated properties. And this meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. So if you would like to testify on any of the public hearing items, you may do so by joining this webinar at the estimated time for that item, which can be found on our public hearing agenda, which can be found on our website. And if you would just like to watch the proceedings, you may do so on our YouTube channel. And with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Research, Kate Limos-McHale.
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Item number 1 is LP 2659, the former Colored School number 4 at 128 West 17th Street in Manhattan, Block 792, Lot 53. Item proposed for the Commission's calendar is a 3-story school building built in 1845 to 50 by the Public School Society of New York City and used exclusively by African American students from 1860 to 1894. And before I introduce Mary Ann Hurley, who's presenting this item, just wanted to give you a little background. It's one we've been working on carefully and have prioritized as part of our efforts to recognize sites of important African American history, in particular from the period between the Civil War and the Harlem Renaissance, which is not as well represented by landmark designations. We received a request for evaluation from the historian Eric Washington and a lot of great research on the building from him, and determined it merited study. We also heard from several organizations about its historical significance and have been studying it thoroughly. While we were studying the building's history and evaluating its integrity, we also worked with our colleagues at the Department of Sanitation and who own the building, and we're grateful for their collaboration. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mary Ann Hurley. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. The former Colored School number 4 is Manhattan's only known surviving example of a racially segregated school from the period between the Civil War through the post-construction era. This extraordinarily significant former public school building was built in 1850, became a segregated colored school in 1860, and continued to serve Black students until it closed in 1894. It is associated with many significant individuals and illustrates how education afforded crucial opportunities and skills to Black students as they struggled against the discrimination and inequities that were part of their daily life. The proposed landmark site is the tax lot located mid-block on the south side of West 17th Street, between 6th and 7th Avenues in the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan. The nearly 175-year-old school building is seen here on the left on West 17th Street, located a block south of Ladies Mile Historic District and a row of designated stables on West 16th Street. At the time the school was constructed in 1850, this area was home to modest row houses, an African church, and commercial and industrial buildings. The 1854 Paris map shows the building as Primary School 27 and 28, built by the Public School Society of New York City. The society was responsible for public education until the New York City Board of Education assumed that role in 1853. In 1860, the school became Colored School number 7 at a time when there were 8 segregated public primary schools in Manhattan. 6 years later, its name changed again to Colored School number 4. The building continued to serve African American students until it closed in 1894. The photograph shows the school as it appeared in 1905, when it was leased by the city to veterans associations. The school was built using one of the model primary schoolhouse plans adopted in 1844 as part of the city's ward school system. This modest plan, in many ways like a row house, was built to accommodate nearly 300 students aged 5 to 7. The first story provided an indoor play area and wood storage. The latrines were located in the rear extension. Boys and girls were kept apart from the time they arrived, entering the building through separate doors and climbing separate stairs located at the rear. Students sat in long rows at tables parallel to the sides of the building. Girls were on the second floor, boys on the third. Since the colonial era, literacy and education have been important priorities within the African American community as civil liberties and the means of advancement within society. Yet the history of education has been fraught with racist discrimination and segregation. The first public education of African Americans in New York City was provided by the African Free School. It was established by the Manumission Society in 1785 for boys and later included girls. An early schoolhouse built on Mulberry Street in 1815 is shown here in a drawing by one of the students. A number of graduates of the African Free Schools became prominent community and national leaders, including Henry Highland Garnet, who became an important abolitionist and editor. In 1834, the African Free Schools were incorporated into the Public School Society of New York City. The former Colored School number 4 was associated with important African American teachers and students. Sarah J. Tompkins Garnett, whose family were well-to-do Brooklyn farmers and merchants, became the principal of the school, notable as one of the first African American female principals within the city's school system. Married for a short time to Henry Highland Garnet, she was not only an esteemed educator and pioneering school principal, but also an ardent suffragist and champion of social justice. She helped establish the Equal Suffrage League of Brooklyn, a group affiliated with the National Federation of Colored Women's Clubs. When the deadly draft riots engulfed the city in July of 1863, unleashing years of resentment toward the free Black community, rioters stormed the school building but were barred from entry. Sarah Garnett and her staff kept the children safe and later accompanied the students to their homes. I do want to add too, in the photograph, Sarah is the one who is seated. In addition to Sarah Tompkins Garnett, another distinguished teacher was Joan Imogene Howard, who represented New York women as a manager at Chicago's Columbian Exposition of 1893. Many students who attended the school went on to become prominent leaders in the fields of education, music, transportation, and public service. Susan Elizabeth Frazier became New York City's first African-American teacher assigned to an integrated public school. Walter F. Craig was a classical violinist, composer, and orchestra leader. and James H. Williams became the chief porter and influential leader of the Red Caps at Grand Central Terminal. These are two other examples of New York City's 19th century schools for African Americans. The former Colored School Number 3, built 1879, is the only known example remaining in Brooklyn and was designated an individual landmark in 1998. Former Colored School PS 48 in Jamaica, Queens, was built in 1886, but it is no longer standing. The post-Reconstruction era of African American history is an important period that is less well represented by landmark designations. This designation would represent that history and the African American community living on the west side of Manhattan. Manhattan removed the word colored from the public schools names in 1886. Colored School Number 4 became Grammar School Number 81, but it continued to serve African American children. 8 years later, in 1894, New York City closed the school. The building has remained in city ownership. It was leased to various Veterans Association groups in the early 20th century. By 1936, the Department of Sanitation was using it as one of their facilities, and it remains the building's owner. Although the front facade was updated sometime in the 1930s by recladding with beige brick and by replacing doors and windows at the first story, it still retains its form and the configuration of its original 25-foot wide 4-bay facade. Incredibly, the configuration of the ground floor with its characteristic 2 entries separating boys and girls remains, as do its historic wood multi-pane double-hung windows at the 2nd and 3rd stories. These generously sized windows figured prominently in the Public Schools Society's plan, and they proudly noted that they could be, quote, moved up and down at pleasure, unquote, for ventilation. After careful study, staff determined that the building retains a majority of the character-defining features that reflect its period of significance in the 19th century. The history of New York City's free education includes the story of the institutional segregation of African American students in the 19th century. Within that history, the former Colored School Number 4 illustrates not only what a small New York City public school looked like before the Civil War, but also the story of prominent teachers and graduates within the African American community, scholars who excelled within their areas of expertise and valued education as they struggled for civil liberties and opportunities. Because of its importance to the history of education in New York City and its service to African Americans in the 19th century, the research department recommends that the commission vote to calendar the former Colored School Number 4 as an individual landmark. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Commissioners, do we have any questions for Marianne or for Kate? Right, I'm not seeing any questions. All right. As Kate said, this came to our attention through a request for evaluation from Eric Washington, who has done a significant amount of research on this property. And we've continued to do research and think about fabric as well as the history. And there is no question that it is significant on so many levels to so many different layers of our history. And so I would be delighted if we could make a motion and to calendar it today and vote on that so that we can hold a public hearing in the near future. So Commissioner Shamir Baran, did you have a question?
Not a question. I just want to say that this is such an important, I think, effort, and it holds kind of very interesting kind of frame for cultural preservation as it meets sort of physical preservation. It would be interesting to hear how others think about that, because it clearly has this kind of the vestige of its institutional history, and there is something kind of unsaid and unspoken and hidden about it. It's so important that we have Eric Washington to lead the way on the scholarship about the deep and rich history of the place. And I think it should be the beginning, and I'm hoping we will see more designations, more thinking on the part of the commission related to not just school buildings, but the kind of the cultural history, and specifically the African-American cultural history of educational institutions in the city. There are many stories and important sites to consider. So I'm very, very proud to think that we're to see that and to participate in this particular potential calendaring.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for your words. Anyone else? Okay, so with that, Commissioner Shamir-Barron, would you like to make a motion to vote to calendar it? You just have to say so moved.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second. Delighted.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, great. So this property is now calendared, and we will hold a public hearing in the coming months. And we'll now move to our next item.
Great, thank you. Item number 2 is LP 2667, the Bronx Opera House at 436 to 442 East 149th Street in the borough of the Bronx, block 2293, lot 46 in part. Item proposed for the commission's calendar is a 4-story Italian Renaissance Revival style theater building built in 1912 to 13 by George Keister, sorry, that became home to Latin music clubs through the 1960s and 70s. And this one I'd just like to introduce briefly to let you know this has been identified by the research department as part of our comprehensive survey of the Bronx, and also by our ongoing work to identify sites important to the Latino community and history in New York City. And like Samuel Gompers High School, it crosses lines between architectural significance, historical significance, and a great deal of cultural significance. So presenting this morning is Bilge Kos.
Good morning. I am Bilge Köse from the research department. The Bronx Opera House was designed by George Keister in 1912 in the Italian Renaissance Revival style. The building served as a popular entertainment and social gathering center for nearly 50 years, from the early Broadway acts along the subway circuit to becoming one of the most significant cultural venues for the city's growing Latin music scene in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. The Bronx Opera House is located at 436 442nd East 194th Street between Bergen Avenue and Brook Avenue in the South Bronx. The Bronx Opera House is located in the oldest major shopping area of the Bronx, in the Melrose area, shown here on a map from 1921. With the 1888 opening of the elevated rail line along 3rd Avenue, the process of urbanization began to transform the Mott Haven, Melrose, and Mauritania sections of the southwestern Bronx, and development only intensified after the arrival of the subway in 1904. Residential housing and small frame structures gave way to new low apartments and large commercial buildings. By the turn of the century, the commercial heart of Melrose, with numerous theaters, shops, and banks, was centered here around the intersection of 149th Street, Willis, 3rd, and Melrose Avenues, known as the Hub. The intersection of 149th Street and 3rd Avenue became known as the 42nd Street and Broadway of the Bronx, and by 1911 was called the Great Business Center of the North Borough. The The developer of the Bronx Opera House was George M. Cohan, known as the man who owns Broadway. Cohan was born in 1878 and died in 1942. He was considered by many to be the first superstar of American show business, working as an actor, composer, playwright, producer, dancer, songwriter, and theater owner, and creating many popular musical numbers such as Yankee Doodle Dandy and Give My Regards to Broadway. Mr. Cohen opened several theaters in the first and second decades of the 20th century, including the Bronx Opera House, as part of the subway circuit. The subway circuit was a term coined to refer to Broadway productions that were tested in the city's outer boroughs before going out on regional or nationwide tours. These shows brought stars like the Marx Brothers and the Barrymores to the Bronx Opera House. George Keister's architectural practice was largely active from 1880s through the 1930s. He designed buildings throughout Manhattan and the Bronx, including two individually designated New York City landmarks, Belasco-Stuyvesant Theater, built in 1906-1907, and Hertig and Siemens Apollo Theater, built 1913-1914. The Bronx Opera House is a four-story building, built as a theater and restaurant composed of two portions. Following the fashion of era's theater buildings, the front portion of the building, where the main entrance, lobby, and restaurants were located, was the public face of the Bronx Opera House. The elaborate front facade of this portion was constructed in the Italian Renaissance Revival style, which features a tripartite design with a classically inspired ornament, articulated fluted pilasters, and carved tympanums, whereas the rear portion, where the auditorium was located, had a plain facade without any ornament. The demographics of this area of the Bronx began to change after World War II, as large numbers of people from Puerto Rico migrated to New York, first settled in East Harlem and soon after in the South Bronx. In 1940, there were approximately 61,000 Puerto Ricans who were living in the New York City. In 1950, that number climbed to 245,000 and continued to rise in the following decade. For the Puerto Rican community in the South Bronx, music and dance performance were the expression of their identity and culture. At the beginning of the 1960s, the Bronx Opera House became one of the most significant artistic centers in the area, where the era's prominent Latin music performers came to showcase their distinctive cultural output. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, the Bronx Opera House was home to a series of nightclubs, including the Club Caravana, the Bronx Casino, and Elsa Romar. The nightclubs had performances by Tito Rodriguez, Charlie Palmieri, John Pacheco, as well as many others. Charlie Palmieri and his brother Eddie Palmieri were both widely popular musicians in the Latin music scene and recorded an album at the building entitled Pachanga at Club Caravana in 1961, which increased the club's popularity and established its reputation as the home of Pachanga. The New York Times, and seen here, the Daily News, acknowledged the Bronx Opera House as a location that was pivotal to the emergence of the Pachanga dance craze. Pictures here show the Palmieri Brothers Band rehearsing in the Bronx Opera House ballroom, and Charlie Palmieri and Dagmar Jarvel demonstrate the steps of the Pachanga. For several decades, Bronx Opera House continued to serve the growing Latin community of the South Bronx with dances and concerts, and for many is remembered as an important place of social gathering and expression of Latinx culture. The Latin music clubs left the building by the late 1970s, and the former Bronx Opera House was used as a Pentecostal church, Temple de Renovación Espiritual, between the 1980s and early 2000s. In 2011, the rear portion of the building, where the auditorium was located, was demolished, and the new three-story office building was constructed on its place, while the northern portion, containing the public face of the building on 149th Street, where the former main entrance, lobby, and restaurants were located, remained and were repurposed as the Bronx Opera House Hotel in 2013. Today, the Bronx Opera House retains its public face with its intact and elaborate facade that reflects its historic use as a theater and is a marker for its cultural history tied to Latin music and culture. it continues to contribute to the social life and liveliness of the hub. The building has been rehabilitated with only minor changes since its use as a theater and center of Latin music. These include window and storefront replacements, changes to the front entrance, and removal of its historic marquee and signage. The landmark site proposed is composed of the historic portion of the building facing East 149th Street. For nearly 50 years, the Bronx Opera House has served the citizens of Bronx and New York, once as a popular theater that saw some of the most esteemed Broadway stars of the early 20th century, and then as a social gathering place where Latin music and dance was performed as a cultural expression of the community. Being home to Latin music clubs, Bronx Opera House was an instrumental place that helped spark a dance revolution with famous acts. Due to its architectural quality and cultural significance to the city of New York and the borough of the Bronx, the research department recommends that the commission calendar the Bronx Opera House as an individual landmark.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions on this one? Or thoughts? Yes, Commissioner Gustafson, please go ahead.
Well, this is just another example of how much learning goes on at these hearings. I first encountered this building about 30 years ago when I was wooing my ex-wife, who grew up in the project 4 blocks away. And everyone in that community, in the Puerto Rican community there, talked about this building in that 1970s framework, 60s and 70s framework, about its history as a nightclub. I had no idea and never would have bothered at that time to go back even further and ask about how it got there. But it looks substantially the same as it did 30 years ago when I first saw it. And I'm very happy to see that we're recognizing it, or we will be hopefully recognizing it.
Great, thank you.
Bravo.
Yeah, it's great. This is, and as Kate said, this is a property that came out of 2 of our surveys, 2 of the research department surveys. One was the Latinx survey team, and the other was more recently we've done, which is an ongoing survey. And then we've also recently done a comprehensive survey in the Bronx, and it was a highlight on both of those surveys and just seemed like a natural one to prioritize at this time. Yes, Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
Right, thank you. I want to echo John's comments. This is a fantastic building in great condition. And all I wanted to add was that the hub itself is a remarkably vibrant, active, changing place that is seeing a lot of development and a lot of interest on the borough's part, on the city's part, and so the retention of valuable historic elements within that vibrancy will only enhance it and make the borough and the city a better place.
Agree completely, and it truly is sort of a landmark in the hub, and I think will integrate with the evolving nature there and enhance it, as you said. All right, Commissioner Gustafson, did you want to add something else, or was that?
Michael makes a very, very, very good point. We need to take a very hard look at the neighborhood in and around here, on both on Brook and on St. Anne's. There is a lot of development going on, and while that is good for the neighborhood, there are some buildings that we need to keep an eye on because they will be lost very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I think we had a dedicated team that did a comprehensive survey in the Bronx, and so these items that we're bringing forward are sites that we identified in those surveys, and we're going to continue to advance on that work. Okay, other thoughts or questions? Right, well, Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to make the motion to calendar?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, this is also officially calendared now, and we'll look forward to a public hearing in the coming months on this one as well. Thank you all. And thanks to Kate and the research team for your incredible work.
Thank you.
All right, great. We'll now move to our public hearing and public meeting agendas for the Preservation Department for applications for work on designated properties.
Thank you, Sarah. So the first item is a public meeting item, and it's docket number 23-07341, 182 to 184 Spring Street in the Sullivan-Thompson Historic District, Borough of Manhattan, Block 489, Lot 25. A commercial building designed by Louis A. Scheinhardt and built in 1921. The application is to review changes to the height of the elevator bulkhead and amend Certificate of Appropriateness 22-07929 issued on April 13th, 2022 for a proposal to demolish the existing building and construct a new building.
All right, great. And I think the applicants are going to be speaking here if the staff may be introducing it, but let's open the proceedings so the applicants can explain the changes to the elevator bulkhead on the new building that we approved. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the applicants may speak when they're ready.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Schnee from SK Development Group. It is good to see you all again, and I appreciate your time. We are coming back to discuss the elevator bulkhead for our new construction building at Spring and Thompson. Just a quick update since we last saw you all. The building has been demolished. We completed our supportive excavation and have begun all our foundation work. We have run up against a little bit of an issue regarding the construction of our elevator and our elevator bulkhead that is unfortunately just due to I don't want to say the sort of pandemic, but the supply constraints post-pandemic and the amount of demand on some of the elevator contractors post-pandemic. We had proposed to use what is sort of a proprietary elevator that's provided by contractors like Otis and Kone. And when we began the development, the lead times that we were being quoted for the elevator were somewhere in the 18 to 20 week range. That lead time for those specific elevators with the lower overrun has ballooned to 36 to 40 months, 40 weeks, apologies. There are non-proprietary elevator systems, it's called Hollister Whitney, that can drastically shrink those lead times from that 36 to 40 weeks to 18 to 20 weeks. And the result is a narrower but somewhat taller elevator overrun. And we've done a fair amount of work to try and mitigate the aesthetic of that overrun, as well as coordinate some of the mechanical stuff on the roof to try and streamline what's up there. And I think the Duke from Seldorf can probably best explain the changes that we've made and the amendment that we're requesting. Again, thank you guys for your time and good to see all of you.
Thank you.
Before you go on, I'm so sorry, Sarah. I can't find Jason Sudik. Jason,
sorry, I'm on.
Okay, great. Can you click on your screen on the presentation? I've given you control.
Oh, okay. Yes.
You just need to click on your screen. You just need to click on the presentation screen. Sorry. Should I give it to somebody else in your office?
Sorry, no, I'm the one I'm not entirely sure. I'm clicking on my screen.
Do you see where the presentation says 182 to 184 Spring Street?
Yeah, click on that, Jason, on the screen itself.
Well, here, can you see my mouse?
Yep.
Yes.
So you just need to click where my mouse is. Excuse me.
Sarah, if you see it, maybe you can drive.
Sorry, I'm not seeing it. I apologize.
Why don't I give it to Sarah instead? Is that okay, Sarah?
Sure.
Okay.
No.
You're not seeing the cursor? Okay, you can control.
All I see is my own face on the screen.
Oh, that's strange. Okay.
There you go. All right.
So
Sarah,
am
you
I?
have control now.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Please state
Thank
your
you.
name for the record.
Sure.
Okay, sorry.
Sarah Lopergolo, Seldorf Architects. Hello, everyone. Nice to see everyone. So I think that Scott explained what our issues are, and I'll just walk you through the comparisons. Okay, so yes, what we are looking at is the change in the elevator overrun. The overrun width has decreased by 5'2", but the height, our bulkhead height has decreased by 2'1". However, the overrun itself is 6'10" taller. So yeah, so this is a comparison between our previous submission, which is on the left-hand side, what the elevator bulkhead looked like on the left. And then this is our current condition, which shows the bulkhead that had gotten narrower, but taller. And so the next slide is looking, we removed the plantings so that you could very clearly see what the difference is between the two issues. And so this is just taking you around again, typically what we've shown you before on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side is our proposed. This is looking west. And you can see, can you see my cursor? You can
Yes.
see, yeah, you can see where you begin to see the elevator bulkhead here. And from Thompson, you really don't notice anything at all that's changed. So this is looking at what our roof plan looks like. So this is our roof and the bulkhead, and then our bulkhead plan as you go up. So this is the elevator right here. And then we sort of shifted our mechanical enclosure to the south side, which is not at all visible from any of the street locations that we've shown you. This is a little diagrammatic, but in this case, on the left-hand side is our previous bulkhead, and on the right is our proposed. And I think what you can see here, we've been working very, very hard at trying to reduce the overall bulkhead screen. We've moved equipment down to the lower portion of the roof, which you see here. We've relocated fans that were jutting up onto, again, also the lower roof. And so by doing that, and like I said here in the back, we put our equipment behind this, so you really don't see that. So this has greatly reduced this sort of size very much down to this portion right here, which we think is very successful. But, you know, as I've mentioned, the actual elevator bulkhead has gotten taller. And here is where you can see the differences side by side in a flat elevation. Obviously, always in a flat elevation, things look a little bit more extreme than they are in the reality of the everyday. But this is where you can see how we were 2 feet taller with our bulkhead, and we've our enclosure, and we've decreased it. And then the elevator overrun is really what has gotten narrower by 5 feet, but again, taller as well. And so this is just to sort of clarify that A is the penthouse, has remained exactly the same. B is the bulkhead, and then the overrun is what has changed. And again, this is from all sides. This is looking east, Thompson, and then from the south. And the proposed west elevation. I think something that we've done is also looked around our entire district to see what else one sees. And given that this is quite typical that the bulkheads are sort of rise above the buildings in a variety of ways. It was useful for us to sort of walk around and see that this is relatively common kind of New York City landscape. And so just walking around, we see this sort of occurs in successful and unsuccessful ways, but it is a feature of the roof landscapes of New York City, as we all know. And just to point a few other areas out. So that's 150 Thompson on the right. And yeah, immediately 1892 Spring. And that is our presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I want to note for the record that Vice Chair Bland is recused on this item and has not been present for this presentation and is not present for our ongoing discussion. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, I am not seeing any questions. So I will note that we did receive a letter from Village Preservation commenting on the size and visibility, and that letter was shared with the commissioners in advance of today's public meeting. All right, so if we don't have any questions, commissioners, we can begin our discussion. And as has been presented, this is the site of a new building that was approved by the commission. And during construction, the applicants have identified an area of need to amend the roofscape. Most notably, the elevator bulkhead, as they've explained, has to do with supply and demand issues and lead times. And so the bulkhead gets narrower, but taller, and then other equipment also gets reconfigured to offset that. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Okay. And initially I found this very jarring. It was remarkably tall. But I think that it can be appropriate given the fact that this is a very common condition in New York City on older buildings and newer ones. I think I can accept it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I shared Michael's sentiment. It is kind of tall, but I think given the context and the surrounding buildings as well as the other examples, I can accept it.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Leffy.
I've spent a lot of time looking at, these two views. I don't know what page it's on, maybe 5 or, and I have to say that I think the way it was before was better. So because it somehow visually blends a little more into the line of the roof and the form of the building. And even though, yes, I agree, the city has very irregular roof lines at the top with lots of things jutting out, it still doesn't seem to sit quite right. So I would have to say no.
Okay. Right, thanks. Commissioner Jefferson?
The original design exposed enough of it for me. And with this additional vertical height is too much for me against the horizontal line of the roof. It's too dominant for me. So I have to say no.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I'm with Commissioners Lutfi and Jefferson. It's and it is a very unusual request to timing issue that would drive an otherwise inappropriate view, so no.
Commissioner Shamir Baran?
I feel the same way. No.
Okay. And I think we don't have enough votes, but I actually also feel like Commissioner Goldblum and Chen that that bulkheads are typical roofscape features found in this district as well as other places in the city, but very notably in this historic district as well. And I think that while it was very nice and tidy in the approved version, I think that if we had seen this, I would have been supportive of a bulkhead in the first instance that was visible, because they are typically typical roofscape features, but we don't have enough votes today for it. So we won't take an action. We do have a number of commissioners absent today. So I think the applicants can continue to study options and different models that may be available that may have a different sightline and footprint and height. And you're also welcome to come back when we have a full group of commissioners. All right, thank you. So we'll move to our public hearing agenda now.
The first item on the public hearing agenda is docket number 2302673, 238 West 11th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, Borough of Manhattan, Block 613, Lot 16. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness, an Italianate-style row house built in 1852 to 53. The application is to replace a door, construct rooftop and rear yard additions, and excavate the rear yard.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Joe, if you could unmute yourself, I will give control of the presentation to you so that you can speak when ready. Okay, please click on your screen. Great.
Okay.
You can advance the slides using perfect. Please state your name for the record. You may begin.
Great. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Joe Vance from Joseph Vance Architects. The property we're looking at today is 238 West 11th Street, as seen here in these photographs. On the upper right, a plot plan that shows you our proposed project in red, with a single-story addition in the rear. Adjacent to that are other properties who have had rear yard additions approved by the commission. The next slide, the tax lot photo on the left, the current building on the right. The current building had a very nicely done facade restoration just in the last 10 years, so it's in physically very good shape. The next photo is the designation photo. It's the far left in this image. You'll see that at time of designation, the shutters that were there in the tax lot photo have been removed prior to designation. This is a streetscape elevation. To the right, 240 is a sister house. Our property at 238 had at some point in time a fourth floor added to it, which is a mansarded skylight in the front. So most of the work we're doing is here in the rear, and apologies, it's quite difficult to get good photos of this, but there's an extensive two-story rear yard addition that's narrow and goes almost the full depth of the site. So on the left, we're standing on the ground. You can see that addition to the right. The middle photo, we're standing on that rooftop addition looking back toward the house, and then a closer version. The rear facade you'll see here has sort of become a mishmash over time. Again, the top floor was not original. It was added prior to designation. But you'll see a combination of window architectural styles, possibly a bay window that came out of a catalog at some point, but the original fenestration is long gone. Context photos of the donut looking west, and our immediate neighbor and view to the south. Satellite photo. So this is the view photo of the mock-up. if you look at the colors here, so the light orangish color, this is where you can see from the street a portion of our new rooftop front railing. Because of that mansarded skylight, everything is visible. And then in pink in that upper photo, those are the only two locations from the street that you can see a tiny bit of the stair bulkhead. And then moving to the left on West 4th Street, there is a gap between buildings that you can peek through, and you get, there's 2 points you can stand and get a tiny bit of a view of the bulkhead and a tiny bit of a view of the rear of the building. So this is the proposed view from the front. On the left is the mock-up. On the right is a rendering of what the roof guardrail would look like. We were able to move this back significantly from our first submission after discussion with staff. So at this point, we've moved it back as far as we can to maintain the required 6-foot lateral fire department FDNY access. And this is another photo where you can see, you can start to see just a tiny little bit of the stair bulkhead, which is a sloped bulkhead you'll see later in the presentation. This is the view through that slot that I mentioned between buildings. So you can see in this view a little glimpse of the stair bulkhead between the flues in the right image. And in this image, you can see just a little bit of the rear rooftop fence. This is our proposed rear addition. So we're proposing a single story garden level, basement level addition, a balcony on the 2nd floor, a Juliet balcony on the 3rd floor. The fenestration goes from large glazed openings in the lower 2 floors to a pair of openings on the middle 2 floors. And then we drop down to 3 punched openings on the top floor. The rear facade is brick. The trim that you see around the windows is cast brownstone, and we're corbelling out the brick at the top of the rear facade. This is a straight elevation showing the rear of our facade, and further left in the photo, the most recently approved projects further west on the block. Another item, the back wall, the existing rear wall of the building is angled from the side property lines. We are proposing straightening that. So we're hinging it at the top point to make it straight so we have an orthogonal building to work with. We are also doing some excavation. We're excavating down, you'll see in the section in a minute, and we're excavating down the rear yard a little bit. If you look at the top right photo, you'll see the existing condition. The rear yard, a portion of it is level with the basement level floor, then it steps up in the back. We're proposing making all that the same level, and it is dropping down 18 inches in total from where it is now. This is the rooftop demolition plan and the rooftop proposed plan. The diagonal hatch that you see in the top left image is the required FDNY path. So you'll see in the front of the building, that 6-foot path starts from the hinge point you'll see in the section in a minute for where the stair bulkhead comes up out of the rooftop. That gives us our 6 feet to where the fence is located, which will be then 4'2" back from the ridge, the existing peak of the rooftop. Existing building section. Proposed building section. And my apologies, we rushed out that late change of showing that roof railing pushed back, and somehow when that happened, a layer got turned off. So what got turned off are the dimensions on the left of this section of the new depths. So I'll read those off to you. So on the left, you'll see a line that says existing basement level. The new basement level is 1 foot 6 inches below that. Then you'll see existing cellar level. The proposed cellar level is 4'7" below that. And then if you go back to the new horizontal extension of the cellar, that the floor of that area is 7'3" below that. We're going deeper to give ourselves the opportunity of landscaping the rear yard above the new roof of that cellar structure. Proposed, the existing facade of the building and proposed, we are proposing changing the doors. We've been unable to turn up anything older than the tax lot photo. However, we strongly suspect that the existing entry door is not an original configuration. We're looking to the sister building on the right and proposing literally matching that standard pair of doors with transom above. Right now, the building has a single door with very, very narrow, solid panels on both sides, and the transom is slightly taller than the sister building transom, and we would like to replicate what's next door. The large skylight is being replaced, but it's being replaced in kind with a new thermally broken steel skylight of the same dimensions and profiles. Before and after existing and proposed rear facade. Existing east elevation of the building, this elevation faces the church. We're proposing 3 new lot line windows here. The existing west elevation. So this is where you can see them, fully see that rear yard addition, and our proposed removal of the rear yard addition with the single story addition at the basement level. This is the rooftop. It's just a sloped stair bulkhead and a mechanical enclosure. There's no rooms up there. These are rendered views of that. We are doing a green roof on the stair bulkhead. And this is all about the front door. So our proposed elevation on the left, on the right, the top left is the sister house, and these others are other buildings of similar age on the block that have pairs of doors. These are some details showing the parapet, the corbelling, the brick, single white brick on metal stud rear wall. Elevation details of the front and rear railings. And material samples. The red brick on the upper left, cast brownstone, paint color of the rear guardrails, a very, very, very pale gray for that front railing to help it disappear. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, commissioners? All right, I don't see any questions at this time, so let's move to public testimony. We may have questions after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And we will start with anyone who signed up in advance and then move to anyone else who would like to speak. So I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of signups beforehand, so we'll be hearing from them first. I will be promoting Christina Conroy to panelist now. So Christina Conroy, if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual and scenic landmarks, interiors, and civic art. This house received a thorough makeover in 1927 in the quaint artist studio mode that swept the village in the early 20th century. It's such a fine example of this kind of conversion that the building is pictured in Andrew Dolkart's book, The Row House Reborn. The 1927 work is significant and historic alteration that should be respected. As seen in the tax photo, the top floor studio window, painted facade, casement bay window at the parlor floor, charming paneled shutters with cutouts, the multi-light single leaf door with ornamental wood surround were all part of this makeover. We hope the commission didn't previously approve stripping paint from the facade and removing the shutters, but the building still largely retains its 1927 appearance, and further diminishment of this character by replacing the 100-year-old door infill would be a mistake, especially as the proposed new door is speculative and not based on historic evidence at this building. We strongly oppose replacement of the door and its wooden framement. The alterations to the rear facade may be related to this 1927 reconstruction. If the top floor with its quirky triple window dates to this alteration, this floor at least should be retained. In any event, the two floors below the top floor should incorporate more masonry. A traditional 3-bay window configuration or another configuration that relates more harmoniously to the top floor would help maintain the historic character of the row house. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And next up, we'll be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I will be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine, speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this application generally appropriate, but feels that the new rear facade is somewhat disjointed. The scheme would benefit from further refinement and a lower ratio of glass to masonry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And next up, we'll be hearing from Anna Markham from Village Preservation. So Anna Markham, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. So if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Anna Markham, and I am speaking on behalf of Village Preservation today. Village Preservation has several concerns about the proposed project at 238 West 11th Street. Namely, we are concerned about the grievously inappropriate alterations proposed to the rear facade. The fenestration pattern and broad panes of glass are more akin to a contemporary suburban townhome development than a historic row house in Greenwich Village. As we have noted in our testimony for numerous row house projects in the Greenwich Village Historic District, this is a disturbing renovation trend completely incongruous with the character of the district. We urge the Commission to put an end to the approval of renovations of this kind. In addition to the rear facade, we agree with Community Board 2 that the guardrail at the roofline should be denied. We are also wary of the excavation proposed in the rear yard, and details of the excavation are not included in the presentation. As we have seen far too many times now, these excavations are high risk with no collective reward. We urge the Commission to deny this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I am looking through the attendees and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval of the front door, transom, and skylight, denial of the proposed guardrail and bulkhead, and recommends that the position and the design of the bulkhead be modified in order to accommodate a less publicly visible guardrail, approval of the demolition of the existing two-story addition, even though they feel that the addition, while not original, is also not without historic value. Approval of the rear extension of the cellar, basement, first and second floors, denial of the proposed changes to the third and fourth floors of the rear facade, and recommends that the top two floors retail the historic fabric, position, massing, and visual vocabulary of the three punched openings with divided light sash windows of the historic typology of the building, as consistent with the practice in the district of retaining historic elements on rear facades when introducing modern ones, and noting that the clearly bricked over openings of the third floor line up with those at 4 adjacent properties, and also that in the absence of adequate information
My
regarding.
AirPods just died.
Oh, sorry. Let me mute you for a moment. And that also finally, that the absence of adequate information regarding excavation from the applicant, any respect of the application that relies upon excavation be examined by the commission in order to verify that the applicable standards are being met to ensure that there would not be a negative effect on the structural integrity of the neighboring properties. And that is all. I'll send it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much, Gregory. And I will note that this application has been reviewed by LPC's engineer, and we'll continue to monitor it. All right. I'd like to ask the applicant if you'd like to respond to other comments that we've heard. Mr. Vance?
Yes, I'm here. And I just got a beep that my AirPods are dying, so hopefully I can talk quickly. I do believe that CB2's comment about the railing, we have changed that railing since we presented to them. So we're hoping that the new railing is minimally visible. Again, at the rear, we do not feel from our looking at closely at the top floor windows in the rear that they were from the 1920s. They seem to be much newer than that. I have no idea when they were done, but they feel like the construction, when you touch it and feel it, seems like it's of a newer construction than that. And again, we've put together the best team we can for excavation. We're using McLaren Engineering that are doing everything, including SOE, Plan B for SOE, Reese Construction, and J Coffee for the underpinning. So we've put together the best team that we could assemble.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I'm going to send you all a request to unmute. All right, and Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion, and the proposal includes the replacement of the early 20th century door with a new door that is modeled on other 19th century doors in the district. And then to rebuild the facade, which is angled right now, to square it off. The building has been altered at the upper floors, and often when we ask to see the top floor be retained, that is because it's historic fabric and it relates to the continuity in the row. This building is already taller and has had a number of alterations, so you may factor that into your decision on this. And we'll begin our discussion now. Commissioner Shamir Baran, would you like to start this one?
Yes, thanks. It actually seems to me that nearly all of the parts of the proposal seem to make sense and not be outrageous to me. I think that the roof is acceptable and the new rail as well. The rear elevation, I can see why some testimony thought or expressed the idea that there might be too much glass, but I don't find that to be the case. I think that the top floor windows, I accept what the applicants are saying, which is that the windows in their mind that exist there now seem to be more new or contemporary than truly historic, and so the configuration of the new windows is not overly. It's fine, firstly, for it to be a new window, but secondly, the configuration doesn't seem to be too big. It's a little bit big, but it's okay. And then following from that, the dimensions of the other kind of balcony openings and windows are actually acceptable, and certainly in comparison with respect to other rear yard additions that are not visible to public thoroughfare review, I think it's acceptable. I do want to express again, as others have, concern about the any kind of excavation, and it is the fact that we've not really seen from the applicant here, despite the fact that they've expressed the fact that the experts will be working on it, that we really haven't seen any more information about it. And I don't know that that would actually help us or put my mind at ease, but I think the amount of excavation here is a little bit concerning, and I suppose that's all I can say on that. Thanks.
Okay, and I will say, I do want to reiterate that LPC has never issued a permit for excavation work that caused damage to a historic building. And we have been, in the last year, we have convened a group of engineers to identify ways to proactively predict structural issues. And we have retained an engineer. So the engineer, as a consultant and an advisor to the staff and the commission, reviews applications that we request him to review, and he has reviewed this application, and that is an ongoing review that happens, and we will continue to coordinate with the Department of Buildings, who of course is also their mandate is to ensure the protection of buildings and public safety. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Hold on a second. Am I unmuted? Yes, good, okay. I generally don't have a whole lot of trouble with this application. I do agree that the back is, I don't know, in a kind of way, very, the style is peculiar to me, but I think that we give rear yard additions or makeovers a fairly wide berth. The railing at the front doesn't really bother me, given its minimal visibility. And I think the changes to the front related to the door are acceptable as well.
Okay, and did you have thoughts on the excavation?
I completely echo your comments. I think that the excavation is a red herring. Look, if someone was a dastardly fellow and wanted to do bad things, those things certainly do happen in New York City, but not on our watch to our knowledge, and certainly not without, I think we as a commission and the building department working in tandem with us have exercised extreme care in this matter, and that there's no worry on my part that this excavation would in any way threaten its neighbors as long as procedures are followed. And it is the applicant's responsibility and the neighbor's responsibility to make sure that happens. And that's the way the system works, and I believe it generally does.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I echo the same sentiment, because it really is the purview of the DOB, the buildings department, in the excavation, because the means and methods of construction and the enforcement and the monitoring, that really is not on the LPC side. And so it's a bad apple that wants to do something normally that's not allowed. That really is so something unfortunate that and we should. I'm glad you set up a special team that's monitoring on this. And I echo Michael's sentiment. I don't have much trouble with the we approve a lot of these rear facades, and the railing on top in the front is minimally visible. So I agree with Michael.
Okay, and you agree on the door as well?
Yeah, that's acceptable.
Okay, thanks. All right, Vice Chair Bland.
I'm lining up in the same way that we've just heard. I believe this whole presentation and application is consistent with what we have normally approved before, including the rear, including the rooftop changes, and the door. I think it's a reasonable thing to echo the neighbor's door in this case. although it would have been also reasonable to keep what's there. But they've chosen to do this, and I think it's not inappropriate to do that. So I guess I'm in alignment with the presentation as it's been made. And regarding the underpinning, I know that we're very sensitive to this. We should always be sensitive to it. It's a little bit out of our control, of course, directly, but I think this applicant's team, I know them. It's high quality, first rate team. So we have to rely on their engineering expertise, and I do, and therefore approve the whole thing from my point of view.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
I am, in agreement with my fellow commissioners on this. The back of this building has been dramatically altered. And so there's almost really nothing to, no pattern to follow. And the work is really barely, visible. I think it would have been, there was an opportunity here to do something a little more inspiring, but the punched windows are simple, and the sizes are sizes that, at a scale that we would normally approve. There are brick surrounds that are consistent with what we approve, and I think it works fine. I think the roof is okay, as is the guardrail, and the visibility from the front of that rail is, very minimal. I think the door in the front is fine. It seems to still go with the building, and also works well with the doors on the buildings around it. And, I'm going to also agree with everyone that, excavation is a sensitive thing. And it's good that the commission will be, staff will be following this, and that, DOB is going to be involved, and professionals who do this properly. So I can approve this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I love the word. I'm in alignment with all the fellow commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, and I'm in alignment with Commissioner Jefferson.
Okay, great. So I think we have a consensus to approve. I know Commissioner Shamir Baran, you were a little concerned about the excavation. Are you comfortable making the motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thanks.
In the matter of LPC 2302673, 238 West 11th Street, Greenwich Village Historic District, an Italianate style row house built in 1852 to 53, the applications to replace a door, construct rooftop and rear yard additions, and excavate the rear yard. I know that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District, and I recommend approval finding. The current rear facade was significantly altered prior to the designation of the historic district, including the addition of a rooftop enlargement and that extends the rear facade and no longer relates to its neighbors in a meaningful way, and therefore the proposed demolition of the existing rear facade and rear extension will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural or historic features. That the proposed work at the rear facade will only be visible from a public thoroughfare through a gap in the street wall at a distance and will not call undue attention to itself. That the proposed reconstruction of the rear facade, including squaring off the alignment of the slightly angled rear wall and modifying window openings, will not disrupt a consistent row of rear facades. That the design of the reconstructed rear facade will feature simple punched openings and brick masonry that will relate well to other row houses on the block. The proposed balconies at the lower two floors will be consistent with decks and balconies with railings found on other rear facades on the block. The proposed one-story rear yard addition will be consistent with the predominant height depth of the other rear additions found within the central green space. That the proposed gray zinc-clad rooftop stair bulkhead featuring a sloped green roof will only be partially visible from the public thoroughfare from limited vantage points over the front facades of adjacent buildings. The proposed roof railings, which will be partially visible over the front facade, will feature a simple design and light gray finish that will help them remain in discreet presence. That the removal of the existing door infill dating from the early 20th century and replacement with a proposed paired brown painted wood panels at the doors and single light transom window will be consistent with the continuing evolution of the facade, which will harmonize with the remaining Italianate style details of the house, and that the excavation will be done in compliance with the Department of Building Regulation under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer or registered architect to protect the building's facade and the adjacent buildings.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
8 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
The next item is item number 2, docket number 2306554, 29 9th Avenue in the Gansevoort Market Historic District, Borough of Manhattan, Block 646, Lot 7503, an application for a certificate of appropriateness, a neo-Romanesque style warehouse building designed by Boring and Tilton and built in 1902 to 03. The application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of painted wall signs.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Jackie, you now have control of the presentation. If you could just click on your screen, then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Thank you, Commissioners and Landmark staff. Can you hear me and see me okay? Thank
Yes,
you.
we can.
Good morning. Thank you for hearing this application today. My name is Jackie Puduvallin of JPD Preservation Consulting. This is 29-33 9th Avenue, located on the northwest corner of 9th and West 13th Street. And what we're asking you to review today is a proposal for a master plan for a painted wall sign. I'm here today with Sean McDermott of Big Outdoor. Excuse me. As already stated, this building is a neo-Romanesque style warehouse in the Gansevoort Market Historic District, built in 1902. It has a history of prominent painted signage. This is a view looking at the building from 9th Avenue, looking northwest. Please note the ghost sign on the West 13th Street elevation at the corner of 9th Avenue, which was likely painted in the mid-20th century. Here are views looking at the building from the other direction, from the west, looking east toward east down West 13th Street toward 9th Avenue. And here's some historic photos of the building: the 1940s tax photo on the left, the 1980s tax photo in the middle, and the designation photo on the right. Unfortunately, I could not find any historic photos looking at the west lot line wall where this work is proposed. But what I can show you is some historic context. This being a commercial and manufacturing district since the late 19th century, there has been a long history of prominent signage in this area. Here are photos taken a couple blocks down 9th Avenue in 1933, looking west at Gansevoort and Little West 12th Street from 9th Avenue. You'll note the very large painted wall sign on the side of 22 West 12th Street, which took up about 40% of the wall and was also not pulled back from the front facade. Here are additional historic photos showing prominent signage. On the left is a building on West 14th Street, which in 1938 had a painted wall sign abutting the front facade as well as other signage. And on the right is the southeast corner of Washington Street and West 13th Street in 1929. This was the condition of at the other end, excuse me, at the other end of our subject buildings block in 1929, with this very large 2-story painted wall sign that took up pretty much the entire wall above the awning facing onto West 13th Street. And lastly, this was the east side of Washington Street between Little West 12th, excuse me, looking south to Gansevoort Street in 1929. You'll note again the presence of a very large painted wall sign, which took up almost the entire lot line wall and was not set back from the facade. Currently, there are a number of LPC approved painted wall signs in this district. Left to right, you're seeing 21-27 9th Avenue, which is with its painted wall sign facing Little West 12th Street. Next is 838 Greenwich Street. And the last two are each one side of 22 Little West 12th Street. Here are the architectural drawings. This is the zoning cover sheet. Here's the roof plan showing the location of the sign on the west lot line wall, noted down here where I'm circling. And here's the elevation drawing showing us in excuse me, showing us in light gray the area of the lot line wall that is visible from the street, the area of maximum visibility. This is an approximation. The area of maximum visibility is 1,010 square feet. The allowable area for a sign on this wall by zoning is 600 square feet. The proposed sign is 344.5 square feet, which will be approximately 34% of the area of maximum visibility. The sign's dimensions are 26 feet 6 inches tall and 13 inches wide, with a 2 foot by 3 foot vendor tag below it. The criteria for the master plan would be a 2 inch standard black or white border, no regulation of content, an installation term of 10 years, total sign area of approximately 34% of the visible area of the lot line wall, and a 2 foot setback from the front facade. Here are renderings showing what the sign would look like as one walks west on West 13th Street toward Washington. And lastly, here are the views as one reaches Washington. On the left and on the right is the view from the High Line. And that is our presentation, and we welcome your questions and comments.
All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions at this time. So let's see if we have any public testimony on this item. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And I'll turn it over to Gregory Kalla to see if we have any testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We did not receive any signups beforehand, and I'm looking through the attendees list now, and I do not see any hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval. Thank you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead. Commissioner Jefferson, did you have a question? Commissioner Jefferson?
Okay, I apologize. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
I was asking, my question was, we have rules governing signs. Why are we looking at this one if the rules are clear?
Well, we don't have rules that have been adopted by the commission that allow for staff level approval. We have a sort of a policy that the commission has established through reviews and of not only individual applications, but a presentation by the staff, and you all as a group developed policy. And so we still will see all of the applications in their first instance. Most of them are for master plans, and the changes to the signs over the period of the master plan can be approved at staff level. But in the first instance, it comes to us. And I believe that this particular sign meets all of the standards in the policy that we've adopted, with the exception of coverage. And normally we approve signs that are have maximum coverage of 20 to 25% of the visible wall surface. This is a unique condition where the building adjacent to it has a setback rooftop addition, which limits the visible wall surface. And so it covers, I believe the applicant said, 34% of the visible wall surface at its maximum view. And then she showed examples of other signs that were sort of hemmed in between adjacent buildings the historic signs that were hemmed in on adjacent buildings. So we're seeing it because we always see them in the first instance, but this does vary from the practice we usually apply or the policy we usually apply in the coverage. And that's because of the setback addition on the adjacent building.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, let's move to our discussion. I'm going to send you all a request to unmute. All right, and Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baron, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion now. And as you've heard, this is a wall sign that I believe follows all of the normal criteria that we've established in a policy, with the exception of coverage because of the unique condition here. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one?
Sure. So, I mean, it sounds like, Sarah, the fact that part of the wall is covered by this addition might provide us with a little more flexibility in terms of the size, but it still seems a little large to me. I'm glad it meets all of it meets the other conditions, but I would say at the bottom, it's you know, just visually, if you look at it, it's a little too low and needs to come up. And then on the left side, it's just a little bit too close to that addition. And I think it needs to come in a little bit. So what those proportions are, I'm not 100% sure, but I think there should be some adjustments.
Okay, that's great. And are you comfortable with them making those adjustments with the staff?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Commissioner Jefferson?
Yeah, this is interesting. These three pictures shows the distance from the sign, and you can see at the middle distance, the sign, the lower portion of the building should not cut off the sign. The sign should be pure in its own geometry. So that should be the criteria we used. On the left-hand side, there's not much you can do, but in the middle view and the right-hand side, you can use the roof edge as a criteria for the height of the sign. And I do agree that it's too close to the pushback of the building, so that could be pushed out a bit. But I don't know what criteria to use for that.
Okay. Okay, from rooftop addition. And we can, again, as they develop the proportions, once you lower it, the staff can work with them on the right setback from the addition. Right, Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I agree that this can take a sign that's maybe larger than we would typically allow. However, I don't think they've got it quite right here, and they can work with staff, I think, to solve that problem. And I agree with Commissioner Jefferson on the way the bottom of the sign is cut off. I'm not sure that actually benefits them much at all anyway. So I would suggest they work with staff to reduce the size and to an acceptable level.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baron?
I'm actually convinced by the made by the applicant about the fact that the particular area in this district has many oversized signs, and I actually think that the size, despite the fact, or because of the fact that it's 20% larger than we typically approve, is, I think, acceptable and appropriate and approvable. I will say what I've said on other occasions, which is that I actually think that the frame is something that I think should not happen on these oversized, very large wall signs. I think it's more interesting and while not necessarily entirely and always historically consistent, but in many cases, frameless is, I think, more interesting in these very large signs, meaning that it's rather than it's sort of like a painting or a piece of work that's framed and we have to focus on it on the wall, that it kind of dives into it's the building that remains and continues to be the dominant and the prominent. And this is a very kind of flat, extra two-dimensional condition on that wall. But otherwise, I think is appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay, I think that I don't disagree with what others have been saying. I think it would benefit from being smaller with a raised bottom. I think that in terms of the spacing left to right, I think it should be equal from the front facade to the border and from the building addition to the border. I think that's a pretty simple standard, and I think the staff can work on it with them. And I also think it's an interesting idea, since we generally do approve these things, and it seems very much within the kind of tenor and tone of the kind of things that staff does on a regular basis, that this be, maybe I was going to say that this be just turned into a rule, but it may be a good idea for us to get a presentation from the staff now that we've been doing this for 5 years, I don't know, or at least a few years since we did the new rules, kind of just do a little overview. Here's what we changed. Here's how it's gone. Here's some examples. And I would wager at that such a review that we would agree as a commission to allow this to be done on a staff basis.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, not to confuse any further, I think, I think the sentiments from the commission seems to be that work with the staff and adjust accordingly. And I do agree with many of the comments from my colleagues that it is, given the history and the context and the size of the district, they should really work with the staff to come up with whatever the majority of the commission deem best.
Okay, thank you. And Vice Chair Bland.
Wrapping it up, I think Commissioner Lutfi got it right from the beginning. And all the other commissioners have pretty much fallen in line with that. So I'm in agreement with it as well.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Staff.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll make a motion to approve it with the condition that they work with the staff to adjust the proportions by raising the height of it and finding the right proportion from left to right. Okay, Commissioner Lutfi, would you make that motion?
Sure. In the matter of docket 23-06 554 29 9th Avenue, Gansevoort Market Historic District, a neo-Romanesque style warehouse building designed by Boring and Tilton and built in 1902-03. The application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of painted wall signs. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Gansevoort Market Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that wall signs are a traditional method of advertising that was historically found in this district, typically on plain secondary facades with exposed common brick. That the painted application of the signage will be in keeping with the traditional application methods and commercial character of painted wall signs historically found on buildings within the historic district. That the sign will be located at an undeveloped secondary elevation, and therefore the sign will not detract from any significant architectural features of the building. That the placement of the sign will help it remain a subordinate presence at the building and within the streetscape, regardless of the type of graphics or number of colors used within the body of the sign. That the sign will include a 2-inch solid painted border, typical feature of historic wall signs. That the vendor tag will have a set location and size, and that the proposed master plan will be valid for a period of 10 years, and the applicant will document every sign approved under the master plan so that there will be a record of the commission can consider when reviewing the effectiveness of the master plan criteria. However, I find that the sign exceeds the 20% exposed wall coverage typical of other commission approvals. However, a larger sign at this location could be found appropriate if reduced in size and relocated on the wall to better relate to the historic building and the adjacent building. I therefore recommend that the applicant work closely with staff on the proportions of the sign to adjust the bottom as it makes sense, and to work on the proportions of the left and right border so that they are also make more sense.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
Right, and John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Chen
Aye.
and Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
8 approved, none opposed. The motion passes.
So that's approved. And please continue to work with the staff on the general proportions and those adjustments.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. We'll move to the next item.
The next item, Commissioners, is item number 3, docket number 2305769, 330 West 42nd Street, the McGraw-Hill Building, an individual landmark in the borough of Manhattan, block 1032, lot 48. This is a proposal for an amendment. A modern international style office building designed by Raymond Hood and Godley and I don't know how to pronounce it, and built in 1931. The application is to amend certificate of appropriateness 22-04937 to modify entrance infill and install signage and marquees.
Okay, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Julie, you now have control of the presentation. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Great. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Julie Rosen from Higgins, Quaysbarth and Partners. And Abby, I actually just wanted to make sure that Tricia Ebner was upgraded to a panelist before we get started.
Yes, she was. I don't see her in here. So if she's having problems, we'll see if we can get somebody else to upgrade her again.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so good morning. Again, I'll start over. I'm Julie Rosen from Higgins, Quaysbarth and Partners, and I'm joined today by Tricia Ebner and Dan Shannon from MDAS Architects, Gerard Nacera from Resolution Real Estate, and Valerie Campbell from Kramer Levin. And as Caroline introduced, we are here to present a new scope of work at the McGraw-Hill Building designed by Raymond Hood and constructed in 1931 for the McGraw-Hill Publishing Company. It's a significant example of the international style. The building is located on the south side of 42nd Street on an interior lot between 8th and 9th Avenues, and the building does extend to the south to 41st Street. And 2 years ago, in 2021, we presented a proposal to this commission to alter the West 42nd Street main entrance and the West 41st Street ground floor infill, and we received approval for that scope. In addition to that work, which was permitted under a certificate of appropriateness, we also received a number of staff level approvals for an extensive scope of storefront restoration work, mechanical work, terrace upgrades, and interior work. And all of that LPC approved scope is part of an overall program to restore and upgrade this office building, which has been plagued by high vacancy rates for decades. And since 2021, the owner has already initiated much of the restoration work on the exterior of the building and is well along with interior renovations and infrastructure upgrades. However, even with these improvements, it has become very apparent that it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to lease the entirety of the building to commercial tenants in this depressed post-COVID office market. And so in order to ensure the long-term vitality and preservation of the building, the owner is proposing to convert the upper floors of the building to residential use and keep the lower floors as commercial. And so that change of uses is really why we're here today, and that is to present modifications at the 42nd Street storefront to amend the existing certificate of appropriateness for these alterations that are required to accommodate this new mix of commercial and residential uses. And these include the 4 items here: to install a new marquee at the building entrance, increase the height of the entrance doors, create a new commercial entry. And then we're very happy to share that we will be restoring the McGraw-Hill signage above the main entry as well. We did learn from staff that that scope and all the other signage scope we'll show you today will be reviewed at staff level, but we'll still have some details to share. And so before we get into the current proposal, we just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on where we've been since 2021. There's been a significant amount of exterior work on the building. All of these very visible mechanical units that were on each setback terrace, those have all been removed. The terraces have been repaired and upgraded for code compliance with new terrace doors installed at 41st Street. That was a existing loading dock that was part of the prior 2021 approval to reactivate that space. And then I also wanted to just draw your attention to this lower right-hand photo. That's a detail of the existing sign banding at the ground floor storefront. That is the current condition. Years of water infiltration, galvanic corrosion at the aluminum panels being next to brass and stainless steel has resulted in severely deteriorated conditions. And there is a huge amount of work that is already ongoing now to really bring all of those elements back to life and return them to the original condition. And here's just a list of all of the work that is currently ongoing. And so really looking to this adaptive reuse, the current project envisions this very exciting adaptation of the building, this reuse of the building, which will convert the upper floors, which is 12 through 34, to residential use. And these floors have smaller floor plates, which can accommodate the residential apartments on either side of a central corridor. And these upper floors are actually very uniquely adaptable to residential use since they were originally used for the McGraw-Hill offices. They had more access to natural light with the smaller floor plates. And so those floors will become residential versus the lower floors, which had deeper floor plates. Those were historically used for the printing floors, and those floors 1 through 11 will remain commercial, with retail continuing to front onto 42nd Street. And so today's proposal really focuses on modifications at this 42nd Street ground floor. I did want to mention that there are a number of other scope items that have to do with the residential conversion that will be reviewed at staff level. Those include some louver relocation, and at the 16th and 32nd floors, which align with new residential floors, we will also be installing new terrace doors and installing terrace partitions for privacy up at those floors. I did also just want to note that those scopes were presented to Community Board 4 last month. And just a look at 41st Street, all of the proposed changes here will be reviewed at staff level. So starting with a look at the historic condition and the changes over time at the main entry on 42nd Street. Originally, there's this very prominent McGraw-Hill signage with a secondary band of address that really framed the main entry, announced the building, the owner, and that was integrated into the horizontal banding, this polychromatic aluminum banding with brass and stainless steel elements, and then this very glazed brass and glass infill condition. Over the years, by the 1960s and then by the 1980s, all of these pieces were kind of continued to be removed one by one as ownership changed at the building. And the upper right-hand corner here, this is the condition that the entry was in when we came to this project. This was the condition at the last public hearing in 2021. There was no historic entry infill, and all of that signage had been removed. And just another look at the previous condition, the existing condition. I did want to mention that the aluminum banding in this kind of teal color and the black, those are not the historic colors. And as part of the storefront restoration, the colors will be returned to the original blue and green based on a finishes analysis. So this is a look at the previously approved scope, and this is showing a combination of the scope that was approved at public hearing and some of the staff level approvals. So at the last public hearing, we did receive approval to install new brass and glass infill at this main entry with 4 swing doors. And above that, the installation of address signage in place of where the historic McGraw-Hill signage used to be. This rendering is also showing new storefront infill, brass and glass, which has been approved as per the 2019 storefront master plan. And it's also showing the storefront restoration with all of those metal elements repaired and the original colors reinstated. And in this proposed elevation, this is showing the modifications that will provide access needs for the new uses, both residential and commercial, as well as provide important wayfinding for the workers, residents, and visitors who will be coming into this building. And I did want to mention that it's really important to have both of these entries on 42nd Street because it is the primary frontage of this building. 41st Street has always really been the kind of the back side of the building. And so in the central entrance, that's going to become the new residential entry. We're proposing to raise the height of those brass doors while still maintaining an alignment with the horizontal facade banding. We're also proposing the installation of a cantilevered marquee to mark the main entrance and express the new use. And at this westernmost bay, currently a retail bay, we are proposing to convert that to a new commercial entry with infill that is reminiscent of the typical retail infill. All of these modifications have been designed to balance meeting the new needs, but also expressing those functions and the different identities while maintaining designs that are very much in the spirit of Raymond Hood's original building design. All of the new elements will be brass, and that is meant to create consistency and compatibility throughout the ground floor and to meld these new elements with the historic. We're also, again, very happy to share that we will be restoring the McGraw-Hill signage above the main entry, as well as the transom address signage above the residential entry and the commercial entry. We're just so happy to be returning these elements to the building, and they've been missing since 1974. So it's about 50 years now for them to come. And a comparison of the existing and proposed. One thing I also wanted to mention is that there is a significant grade change as you move from east to west along the building frontage. You can start to see that in the granite base conditions, how much taller it is here at the west side of the building. But that also has an impact on the door heights. There's already in the existing condition a significant differential between door heights as you move from east to west. And as part of the design concept for the new installations, we've created this general alignment of all of the door heights so that we have that consistent horizontal, but we're also starting to create a little bit of a hierarchy between the residential entry in the center, the commercial entry in the west bay versus the other retail bays. And just looking also at the change of use, just a high level overview of approved versus proposed. We are maintaining the same number of entries to the building that exists today and maintaining all of the existing setbacks within each bay of infill. We also wanted to share a ground floor diagram to introduce you to the change of use and talk a little bit about how everything will flow. And the locations of the residential entry and the commercial entry have been very clearly defined based on a number of interior and exterior conditions. On the interior, there are existing elevator cores in the center of the building. Those cores actually date to the original construction. At the west side of the floor plate were the low-rise elevators. Those served those lower printing floors with the larger floor plates. On the east side of the building, those were the high-rise elevators. Those went up to the upper office floors. And so we're keeping those intact. And so that has also helped to determine the flow of how people will be entering the building. Having the residential entry in the center creates that direct flow to the high-rise elevators, the commercial entry, direct flow to those low-rise elevators. So that's the internal perspective. But looking at what's happening outside of the building, as you can see here, we have the Port Authority directly to the east, and we have a post office to the west. We have received information largely from Community Board 4 that the new Port Authority construction will be moving forward in the near future. We are expecting that construction to be ongoing for a very long time, and we're expecting quite a bit of disruption at that end of the building. And that has also been part of the impetus to really locate residential in the center of the building, keep both of those entries at the west side away from the Port Authority. And that also opens up the opportunity to keep that retail presence right next to the Port Authority, where that is really important. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Tricia Ebner to talk about the design.
Hi, everybody. So as Julie touched on, the change of use for the building at the central entry from commercial to residential, it really necessitates the introduction of a marquee to create a sense of place and entry for people's homes, while also to provide some protection from the elements upon entering and exiting the residence. So in the design, we utilized forms and materials that were derivative of Hood's amazing design to create a modern insertion that speaks to the historical context and intent. We looked to the strong horizontality of Hood's design, and we studied the proportions and of the banding utilizing the rectilinear and curved profiles to create dimensionality on the face of the marquee, while introducing transparent elements at the top of the marquee to increase visibility to the new signage of the restored signage elements that we were bringing to the facade of the building. We also had a pretty intensive study of the aesthetics and constructability. The height of the canopy was set at 9'3" above the sidewalk to maintain the existing Hood curved experience to the sidewalk pedestrian. In order to impact the existing facade as minimally as possible, we located the insertion of the canopy at the location of the aluminum panels. The aluminum panels, through the restoration work that's currently underway, were determined to be extensively corroded and are going to be replaced. So all of the blue and green panels are going to be fully replaced in kind, while also the canopy is located between these two stainless steel elements that are currently being restored and will be reinserted in the coming months. So similarly, we raised the height of the entry doors to increase the visibility into the vestibule. The interior vestibule is also being restored as part of this scope. So we wanted to increase street visibility for the pedestrian into the original Hood design, and to also not interrupt with an additional horizontal element. And then these taller doors create a more welcoming experience for the building user while inviting visual connectivity to all users. So then the next slide, Julie. So approaching the commercial entry here, we look to the master plan and the original Hood design of the cadence of the retail programming. So the new use requires 2 sets of double doors here. So we really utilize the existing master plan, the existing 3-foot setback for all of the door entryways, referencing the details of the side lights and all of the profiles of the brass elements, while also we had to increase the entry door height as required to create street presence, and introducing integrated sign band that also references the profiles and materials of the Hood design. In establishing the height of these doors on the side band, we referenced the existing horizontal elements to create alignments and new datum points that tie in with the historic elements. So the whole objective in the design of this new entry was to create street presence while also maintaining the visibility, the lightness, the cadence of the retail programming as established by Raymond Hood. So I'll hand it back to Julie.
Great, thanks so much, Tricia. So just to draw on some of what Tricia said, as part of the design process, we started to look at, what were other buildings in Midtown, commercial buildings that were constructed in the 1920s, how were the architects working through entries at those buildings? And we're sharing just some particularly significant examples of Midtown landmarks. These are all individual landmarks currently, to show that these commercial buildings, many of them with very strong stylistic detailing throughout, frequently had marquees. They were used to mark the main building entries, differentiate them from retail bays or other secondary entrances, and they really balanced this kind of functional need with a stylistic element as well, and they were integrated into the overall design. Of particular note are the Empire State Building and the Channon Building marquees, which really had a strong emphasis on horizontality. They were also used in conjunction with setback entrances to create this balance of in and out at these bays. And I also just wanted to note Raymond Hood's Daily News building immediately across Midtown on East 42nd Street, where Hood in this instance used a designed projecting marquee at the entrances in combination with other detailing and design around the main entrance. So it's really this balance of textures and details that he employed here, and we used this as inspiration for our proposal at McGraw-Hill. And we also looked at recent LPC approved entrance and marquee installations at individual landmarks throughout the city. Many of these projects also had to do with a conversion of some sort. And so we're seeing McGraw-Hill building becoming part of this long history of building conversions all over the city. Of particular note here, I just want to point out the One Wall Street design that was approved a few years ago. Here too, Art Deco landmark, this idea of a recessed entry balanced by a projecting marquee was of interest to us. And then also the Waldorf Astoria hotel conversion, which also was balancing a hotel use with a residential use, the presence of two marquees next to each other, primary larger marquee for the main hotel entry, and then a smaller, more deferential marquee for the for the residential entry. And I'll move through some design slides, some detail slides. Happy to come back to these if anyone has any questions. But looking at the main entry, the center entry at 42nd Street, one of the big takeaways from the historic design was the transparency of the main entrance infill. And that is something that the design team has really worked to maintain and incorporate as the designs have evolved over the last few years. In the center, we have the approved design that raised the height of the doors basically to align with that historic horizontal member. And in our proposal, we are proposing to just increase the doors a little bit more, again, maintaining that horizontality, the relationship to the banding on the piers, but just kind of lifting up everything and maintaining that glazed nature of the infill. So clicking through, you can see the historic and the approved. In 2021, we did receive approval to raise the height of the entry doors from 7 feet to 8'2". We are now proposing to raise them up to 9 feet. That is to create a more welcoming entry, allow more light into the interior, and align with the marquee that will be 9'3" above the sidewalk. Also wanted to just talk a little bit more about how the marquee location was determined. The connection here, and you can actually see this in the RCP, the connection is done to internal steel columns that are set back behind the face of the storefront banding. And those are existing steel columns. There's a lot of study about how we could tie into the existing steel structure with as little impact as possible to the building. And so this proposed location requires the minimum amount of framing to support the marquee, and that allows us to keep the profiles really slim and light and to really have this floating element within this bay. And all of this can be done, as Tricia mentioned, without impacting any historic fabric. And just a couple of marquee details to share as well. As Tricia mentioned, the marquee will be brass clad that will match all of the historic metal elements at the building. The top will be glazed to allow that light transmission and visibility up to the signage above. There will also be some integrated lighting in here, and you can see this in the RCP. There will be strip lighting at the border of the glazed inset panels at the top. There will also be some downlight fixtures at the back of the marquee. You can see that here, as well as a linear uplight, which will shine light on the stucco ceiling and allow some of that to bounce off of the space. This design incorporates all of the necessary waterproofing and drainage structure, all within a 14-inch height. So very, very slim, a little 7-inch border where there will be some minimal signage. And then building identity changes, just an overview of going from the historic and the restoration and the proposed. And then looking at the commercial entry on the left is the approved design. This is per the 2019 storefront master plan. That is the work that is currently approved. And then on the right is the proposal to really just modify that storefront bay to create this new office entry. Some enlarged details of the approved design. The big points here are the 3-foot setback of the doors, really a lot of glazing here in this kind of vertical tripartite separation within the bay itself. also 8-foot high doors. And then the proposal, the conversion, is really utilizing all of those approved details, just widening the entry doors a bit so that we can get 4 doors in. That's to meet all of the pedestrian access needs here. Also raising the height of the doors to 9'1" above grade to create this nice alignment with the horizontal banding. Maintaining the transparency, keeping that tripartite configuration up at the transom. And then again, for wayfinding and for a little bit more presence, adding this slightly projecting marquee just 10 inches from the face of the glazing, 6 inches high, to create a little bit of protection at the entrance. Again, maintaining that 3-foot setback so that we keep that rhythm along the ground floor. And then again, signage for the commercial entry. This will all be reviewed at staff level, and it's per the master plan. And then just a summary of the proposed scope, again, focusing on the main entrance here and then the new commercial entry. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Shamir Barron, please go ahead.
Can we just one more time see a historic photo? I know we saw the historic rendering, but if there's a photo for us to see, that would be great.
The historic photo of the entry?
Yes, please. The entry, and including kind of a bit to the right and left of it if possible.
So I will go back to the slide that we had of the.
Thanks.
Sorry, it's a little lagging a little bit. There we go.
Okay, I just have a question about whether or not the band that has the 330, the address on either side of the actual entry, is that opaque or somehow a little bit of a different glass from underneath, or not, or back painted? I cannot tell.
Within the actual
kind of the transom piece, the top piece.
The question is the sign that says 330 West 42nd Street, is that sort of, are those open letters attached to?
Oh, I'm sorry, they're open.
framework?
Sorry, the sound was not coming through clearly. My apologies. It's open. Yes, it's just a little raceway. The banding just continues. It's completely open back there. And that is how the current proposal is.
Perfect. And then to the right and left of that, those transom-ish windows, no, beyond that, to the right and beyond, yeah, is that darker in any way changed, or is it a clear glass?
That would have been a clear glass. I can see what you mean. I think we're getting some reflection in the photo, but yeah, all of the glass was always clear.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
Yes, and the marquees, the two marquees, they're different formal characteristics. Why are they different? One is 6 inches, one is about a foot. One is.
So when we were designing the marquees, the central entry is still, we wanted to establish it as the central main entry of the building, as that was the hierarchy as originally set by Raymond Hood. So the design of this central marquee is derivative of the forms of the building, and you can see the curved edge that really mimics the entry profiles there that we were studying to make sure that you felt the cadence of the entry. And whereas the commercial entry, it's less of a marquee and more of a sign band. It's a way of providing the legibility and wayfinding for the commercial entry without having such a dominant presence for the secondary use.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. And if you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. As always, we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to others. But whether or not you signed up, please raise your hand so that we can find you. All right, and I'll turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a number of signups beforehand for this application, so we'll be moving through those first. The first of which is Paul Devlin from Manhattan Community Board 4. So Paul Devlin, I will be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
I think I'm here now.
Yes.
Excellent. Good morning, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. I'm Paul Devlin. I am the co-chair of the Manhattan Community Board for Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee. At our last full meeting, Community Board 4 voted to recommend to the Landmarks Preservation Commission to approve with conditions this application to amend the certificate of appropriateness to modify entrance infill and install signage and marquees. The three conditions are that: 1, ownership keep 330 West 42nd Street as the address for the entire building. 2, ownership consider installing a storefront entrance on West 41st Street. And 3, ownership look at adding trees and beds to both the West 42nd Street and West 41st Street sidewalks. Let me begin by commending the project team and ownership for their thoughtful plan to renovate this iconic landmark, and to thank them for their openness in hearing and addressing our concerns. In 2021, our work together resulted in ownership agreeing to retain the historic McGraw-Hill sign atop of the building, which was a significant issue for us. There are some issues that we discussed at committee and board level in regard to this current proposal. The installation of a cantilevered marquee over the residential entrance resulted in lengthy discussions about the architectural aspects and intent of the component. The committee voted unanimously in favor of the proposal, and the full board subsequently voted by majority to support this change. As to the address, 330 West 42nd Street is the address of the building since it was built 90 years ago. Changing the residential address to 328 seems neither an improvement nor a necessity, since wayfaring signage could easily make it clear that the commercial entrance just west of the residential entrance is part of the building. 330 should remain the address for the entire building. As to West 41st Street, the rear of this building, as Julie notes, the Port Authority has commenced its terminal replacement project, and when completed, West 41st Street is going to be a very active street. Rather than waiting and coming back with another amendment to the present plan, ownership should look at the West 41st Street storefronts and consider making their entrance from West 41st Street as inviting as the proposed West 42nd Street entrances. As to the sidewalks, the board recommends that ownership commit to tree and planting bed installations on both West 42nd Street and West 41st Street sidewalks. The board encourages ownership to expand the West 41st Street sidewalk and look at this as an opportunity to complement the work being done by the Port Authority. And finally, the original 2021 application raised community concerns about the lobby in this building. We understand that the interior of this building is not landmarked, but we are grateful to learn that ownership's intent is to integrate the historic fabric of the lobby into the new construction, and gratified to learn that the height of the lobby will not be changed. We are grateful for the project team's commitment to our concerns, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. And next up, we'll be hearing from George Calderaro. So George Calderaro, I will be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. George Calderaro for the Art Deco Society of New York. The McGraw-Hill building is a unique skyscraper, being both one of New York's major Art Deco monuments and the herald of the newly emerging international style. It has received wide critical praise since its completion. Commissioners, these aren't my words. They're from the findings of the Commission's McGraw-Hill designation report. This isn't just an average 1930 office building. As the designation report explains, it is the only New York office building singled out for the influential, quote, international architecture exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, which gave birth to the phrase international style. And at the same time, it is a major example of the more dramatic and abstractly decorative modern style. There's nothing else in New York quite like it. At the time of its designation in 1981, the building's future was far from secure. In 1970, McGraw-Hill had moved to its new tower at Rockefeller Center West, leaving the building vacant for 4 years. The neighborhood, considered a Western outpost of the general decrepitude of Times Square, did not inspire hope for a promising future. Today, half a century later, West 42nd Street has revived, and the McGraw-Hill building is being upgraded. In general, the current plans seem to be an improvement for the building and should be applauded with one exception. That exception is the canopy proposed for the original entrance being repurposed as the entrance of what will become the building's residential portion. Canopies aren't uncommon on residential building and normally not a major concern for preservation. In this case, however, the proposed canopy poses a problem. The Commission's designation report findings call out the building's, quote, entrance treatment as an outstanding feature, end quote. It describes the entrance this way. The entrance walls curve in from the main front and are finished in alternate dark blue and green steel bands separated by silver and gold colored metal tubes. These bands are carried into the lobby of the building on green enameled steel walls, end quote. The entrance's sweeping curves, in other words, were designed to carry the building's remarkable exterior design into the interior. The effect of the original entrance design was to pull the outside curves in. The effect would be countered by the proposed canopy, which pushes its curves out. It's not just that the entrance didn't originally have a canopy, which it didn't. It's that the canopy is effectively the opposite of the entrance design. The entrance design called out in the designation report as an outstanding feature. The Art Deco Society of New York joins others testifying today in opposing this aspect of the proposal before you and urges you not to approve it. We also share with our colleagues' interest in pursuing the possibility of restoring the original pieces of the lobby that were stripped from it a year ago.
George, I'm terribly sorry if you've reached 3 minutes. Would it be possible for you to wrap up your testimony?
I've just got one more sentence, thank you. That's been in storage. The success of the building's residential conversion will doubtless benefit from the prestige of its history and design. It would seem only logical to build on that prestige by restoring Raymond Hood's originally lobby design as much as possible in the newly renamed Deco Tower. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And next up, we will be hearing from Christina Conroy from VSNY. So Christina Conroy, I will be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society in New York. The Victorian Society is opposed to the proposed marquee at the main 42nd Street entrance, now to be used for the residential part of the building. This entrance, in its original form, is a perfect architectural expression of the city in motion, funneling pedestrians into the lobby in the morning and out to the street in the evening. There are no corners or edges to slow the movement. The marquee would compromise this quality by visually cutting into the horizontal banding and reducing the apparent height of the opening. It would, from some angles, obscure the cutout signs above. It meets the facade's curves awkwardly with gaps between the back of the rectilinear marquee and the curved entrance. It appears also to have little purpose, as there is already a deep projected area at the entrance and the marquee wouldn't extend to the curb. We also find the further changes to the door and transom heights inappropriate. The proportions should remain as close to the original design as possible. As the part of the building with which pedestrians most frequently and closely interact, the entrance details would have been designed very deliberately by the original architects. They should not be messed with without very good reason. We do not object to the marquee at the new office entrance. It is diminutive and wholly within the area of the storefront infill. Finally, we also address the issue of the lobby because the proposed change in building use, we think this would be a good opportunity to reinvigorate the discussion of reconstructing the historic lobby using materials supposedly salvaged. We recall at the public hearing 2 years ago, several commissioners expressed their desire to preserve and designate the lobby before we learned the commission staff had already issued a permit to demolish it. Even though this issue may not be on the formal agenda, it would be appropriate and desirable for the commissioners, being both the public's representative to the commission and the public face of the commission, to encourage the owners to follow through with a preservation-oriented approach. Expanding the public discussion to the broader issue of the continuing loss of significant interiors, both designated and undesignated, would also be useful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine, speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC is pleased that this updated proposal includes the restoration of the McGraw-Hill signage on the building's facade, but we find the addition of a canopy over the historic entrance to be completely inappropriate. We agree with our colleagues at Save Chelsea and the Alliance to Save the McGraw-Hill lobby that the proposed canopy violates Raymond Hood's design intent by disrupting the speed lines and sense of inward flow that make this entrance so dynamic. We would also note that Hood's deeply recessed entrance design makes the addition of a canopy totally unnecessary, and that a canopy would obscure the McGraw-Hill signage that the applicants are taking the time and effort to restore. We hope that the applicant will continue that effort inside the building by also restoring the building's glorious lobby to its original Art Deco splendor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Kit Garrett from New York Sites and Insights. So Kit Garrett, I will be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hey, I'm just trying to get myself open here so I can see this. Sorry. I'm Kit Garrett, a board member of Save Chelsea. And while the McGraw-Hill building stands outside of Chelsea, it is near and important enough that we feel compelled to provide this testimony. Save Chelsea strongly opposes the planned entrance canopy. Its outward projection violates Raymond Hood's emphasis on inward flow. His dynamic entrance to the McGraw-Hill building captures the movement of pedestrians on the sidewalk and sweeps it into the lobby. This fluid effect is accentuated by the entrance's curved sides and speed lines, which seamlessly wrap the front facade into the lobby. The power of this design depends on its radically modern clarity and simplicity. A canopy would be a distracting complication. The applicant's examples of building canopies from the same era merely underscore how deliberately Hood avoided one here. The proposed canopy would also obstruct sightlines to the entrance signage above it, which Hood put on such clear and prominent display. Most regrettably, the elegant floating street access address would be obscured. Building entrances are typically among the most sensitive parts of a building design. McGraw-Hill is no exception, and the building itself is an especially sensitive landmark. Included in MoMA's epic-making 1932 International Style Exhibition and book, McGraw-Hill was decades ahead of its time. Raymond Hood is known as one of the greatest skyscraper designers and most important New York architects on the basis of only 4 towers in this city. His only other skyscraper is the Chicago Tribune Tower. McGraw-Hill was his last and most forward-looking. It's not just another city landmark, but a building that influenced the course of world architecture. Its role as a living document of that history adds special value to its claim on authenticity. Architecture students and enthusiasts should be able to visit the building with the entrance Hood designed for it. A canopy is not critical to the building's residential use. We also note that the applicant shared no design with Community Board 4 for salvage parts of the lobby. A residential lobby could incorporate the historic material and follow Raymond Hood's original floor plan with only minor changes, reopening the possibility of interior landmark designation. 2 years ago, Commissioner Goram said the lobby would certainly merit designation. Commissioner Chapin agreed, and Commissioner Holford Smith said in quotes, "I certainly would encourage the owner to preserve as much of the interior as possible so that we can landmark this lobby, which is an incredible, one-of-a-kind space," unquote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Francois Bolak. So Francois Bolak, I will be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Françoise Bolak, and I'm testifying today on my behalf. I'm an architect and also as the chair of the Preservation Committee of the City Club of New York. And I'm testifying to ask you to deny this application. I was very happy that Commissioner Shamir Baran asked to see a historic photograph of this entrance, because I think that is the secret to how to move forward. This entrance, as originally designed, the wall of the entrance where the glass wall where the doors were located was designed as a whole thing. It's not a question of the doors and a meager little transom above. It was designed as a very tall glass wall with, horizontal and vertical divisions. And that is the entrance. It's not about the doors, it's about the design of this whole wall. And when we started approving taller doors, then we completely vitiated the idea of Hood's design, which is to design a whole glass wall. And I think that is really what needs to be restored. So I'm asking the commission to look at this photograph again and ask the owner to restore this wall as it was. And this is the entrance. It doesn't need a canopy. It is dramatic and it is beautiful enough and it needs to be seen. Right now, this design is not visible. And so this whole entrance sort of design, Hood's design, has been denied to this whole building. So this entrance is now something else. And so I think that it's really important to look at this photograph again and ask the applicant to restore this wall exactly as it was. And it is recessed. It won't need a canopy. You can take shelter from the rain in this recessed entrance. And I'm sure that it's a residential building, and there will be doormen with very generous umbrellas. So the canopy is really unnecessary, and it's nicely designed enough, but it really doesn't belong there. So restore this glass wall as it was, and this will be a perfect entrance to a restored lobby. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from a call-in listener. The final 3 numbers of the number is 373. So I am going to allow you to speak now. And if you could... Hello, yes.
I'm Theodore Grunwald, co-founder together with my colleague, Thomas Collins, of the Alliance to Save the McGraw-Hill Lobby. In 2021, we sued the owner and the commission in order to protect and preserve the famous lobby. As usual, my testimony is illustrated. Please go to Ted Grunwald, that's Grunewald, on Twitter, to see 3 comparative diagrams. Apparently, my largely supportive position on this application appears to be major news, at least according to New York Today in this morning's New York Times. And for good reason, because this application has several good things to recommend it. Restoration of original signage, rejiggering of required building numbering, a discrete deferential secondary office entrance are all executed respectfully, skillfully, and carefully, with details replicating adjacent storefronts. To confirm accuracy, applicants must consult Raymond Hood's original working drawings for these areas, held by the Drawings Collection at Avery Architectural Library, where they await digitization. As an expert on this building, I urge the Commission to reject, not revisit, the wholly inappropriate residential canopy. I've listed the many reasons why on comparative diagram number 3, posted on Twitter, and I remind the Commissioners, Recessed entries of two of the world's greatest buildings, Sullivan's Bayard Condit building and the Chrysler building, like McGraw-Hill, have never been disfigured by superfluous canopies, and would be if they were. I have studied McGraw-Hill intensively for 2 years. I have gone over every square inch of the original drawings at Avery in comparison to the pre-demolition photographs. Representations which continue to be made by the owner and by this body that the 1932 lobby was butchered are provable, self-serving fabrications, and I'll defend that statement in court if I need to. This project's repositioning offers only one opportunity to do the right thing and put Raymond Hood's back together again with integrity. The owner's architect has stated on the record that all of the historic fabric has been removed and stored, and that it is our intent that those components are integrated into the construction of the residential lobby as well as the commercial lobby throughout the building, close quote. Though not part of this application, sprinkling lobby fragments all over 34 floors is a terrible, gruesome outcome for this important landmark, since the residential lobby's footprint, cubic volume, function, and circulation are nearly identical to the 1932 configuration. Logic dictates that the fragments are reunited to create the most breathtakingly sophisticated, elegant, and historically significant apartment lobby in New York. If the marketing team prevails and the new lobby ends up as another white box with accents like every other luxury condo in town, the repositioning will certainly fail, as prospective tenants will find hundreds of other identical apartments with bland lobbies in far better neighborhoods than 42nd Street next to the Port Authority bus terminal. The Alliance urges the
Sir,
owner
I'm
and
sorry.
architect.
If
Yes?
you could please wrap up your
May I read the last sentence, please?
Yes, please. Yes.
The Alliance urges the owner and architect to do the right thing, not only for themselves, but for the hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world who cherish this unique hybrid of international style, streamlined modern, like Philadelphia's PSFS building. The owner could reap a gold mine, but only if they do the right thing and restore this extraordinary lobby. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Thomas Collins. So Thomas Collins, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Thomas Collins. I'm a graduate student in art and architectural history at CUNY. And I'm just here to testify today to urge you to reject the proposed entrance canopy presented for the McGraw-Hill building. Although I believe that modern additions to historic landmarks can often add value and extend their lifespans, this application fundamentally fails to respect the design intent of Raymond Hood, who is more than capable of designing an entrance canopy here if it were warranted. The historic entrance of horizontal enamel panels is striking for its boldness and economy of means. Inward curving forms suggesting the dynamism of automobiles, its formal and functional logic to channel movement into the building is fundamentally opposed to a canopy pushing outwards onto the sidewalk. Although the applicant has presented precedents of Art Deco canopies that have served as design inspirations, I don't believe it's a question of the canopy's design or materials so much as its placement and its relationship to the larger structure that is inappropriate. This is not a grandly scaled, multi-storied entrance like the Empire State Building. Part of the movement of international style was moving away from the monumentality in architecture. And this is really the entrance at McGraw-Hill is about inwardness and moving into the lobby and not pushing outwards. I would like to ask the owners and commissioners to consider what value does the proposed canopy add? And does its inclusion outweigh the adverse impact it has on the original design? It would seem to me that the owners could differentiate between the residential and commercial entrances through other signage or wayfinding. I think it's nice to see the commercial entrance has a more appropriate design, but this raises the problem of the awkwardly inefficient ground floor plan that results when segregating the residential from the commercial spaces. It sacrifices the functional planning of the original lobby. Although it's outside of the scope of this hearing, I would like to encourage the owners and their team to restore the lobby to its original configuration with modest adjustments for new residential requirements. Numerous Art Deco offices have been converted to high-rise residential complexes while restoring and preserving their lobbies and maintaining the signature streamlined Art Deco aesthetics. Lastly, I would really like to encourage the commissioner to study, survey, and designate more public interiors. It seems like I say this at every public hearing, but it just warrants repeating since the last designation of an interior was over a year ago for Warren and Wetmore lobby. There are many interiors that are outstanding examples. The 42nd Street Library interiors still need to be designated. The Met Breuer interiors should be designated. There's an application for 60 Wall Street, the atrium, that still has not been calendared. And I think the commission just needs to approach this more holistically and think about interiors as landmarks before alterations and demolition happens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And I'm looking through our attendees, and it seems as though those are all the hands raised. So I will note we also received additional testimony from Doko Momo and one other individual, which was shared with the commissioners beforehand. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to turn to the applicants and ask if you'd like to respond to the testimony.
Thank you. Yes. If we could actually just go to the last sheet with the two renderings, that might be a good place to start. So I'd like to begin by just responding to some of the testimony about the new entrance marquee. I think these will be helpful slides to look at while I do that. So we did look back at the historic conditions of the building and all the elements that were there. And I just wanted to talk again about the fact that this entry changed so many times over the years. The condition when we came to this project was not something that was perfectly intact, and there has been much restoration work and a consideration of bringing back these historic elements to this part of the building. And we're very happy that all of those things can be part of this project. But as part of this new use, as part of looking at the future of the building, these new elements, including the marquee, are really important for the new use to mark the main entrance, to again, take this building into the next phase of its use. And as we talked about a little bit when we were looking at the details earlier in the presentation, the marquee has been designed and located really to minimize the visual and physical impact on the historic features. The height of the marquee above the ground, the location of it kind of at the outer face of the banding will really allow those lines and the curves and that movement to remain legible and experienced by pedestrians as they interact with the building. The presence of the marquee does not prevent the visibility of those lines moving from the exterior to the interior. So we were very careful as we designed this project that those elements, those defining elements of this building were going to be maintained and preserved and even restored. Also just wanted to note that when we went through this earlier, there's both historic and contemporary precedent for the installation of marquees. It's similarly scaled commercial buildings, it's similarly scaled recessed entries at Art Deco commercial buildings. And this play of inward and outward is something that has been part of buildings of this design since they were originally constructed. This idea of the lightness of the brass banding with the glass top as well, all of these design elements have been integrated to maintain that legibility of all of the features. And I do want to just hand it over to Valerie Campbell, who will respond to some of the other testimony.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Valerie Campbell from Kramer Levin. I did want to respond to some of the testimony that was just given that really relates to the Commission's jurisdiction. As I think the Commissioners know, Landmark staff looked at the interior lobby on 2 occasions, and both times determined that the lobby was too altered to merit consideration as an interior landmark. the litigation that Mr. Grunwald referred to was dismissed by the judge. And with respect to the community board's comments on the street trees, we certainly, the ownership is certainly interested in pursuing that, but because this is an individual landmark, the commission actually doesn't have jurisdiction outside of the tax lot of the building. So.
Great, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, so I don't see any questions. I'm going to start to ask you to unmute so that we can close the hearing and move to our discussion. So Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion? Oops, Commissioner Lutfi. All right, let me ask Commissioner Jefferson if you would second that motion.
So second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as you've heard, there are lots of aspects of this that are outside of our review today. The signs are being reviewed at staff level as they are restorative, and any discussion on the interior is not part of the scope that's before us today. So we'll focus our discussion on the two areas of change, which are the entrance doors at the main entrance. The commission previously approved raising the height from the original height 7 feet, I think, and we approved 8 foot 2 inch high doors. And the proposal today is to raise them even further to 9 feet. The proposal also includes the entrance marquee, which has been described and discussed at length. And at the commercial entry, new commercial entry, the proposal includes new infill with wider doors and overhang to mark that entry for that portion and that use in the building. So we'll begin so it's 2 entrances and 2 marquees, although one is more of an overhang. So we'll begin our discussion. Vice Chair Bland, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Well, I want to start with the commendation of a really thorough and I think improved proposed design here, as was noted in several of the testimony that we heard. So I support that and applaud it. But like I think almost everybody who did testify, I'm also in agreement with that testimony that the new canopy under the McGraw-Hill sign is inappropriate, not needed. I don't need to say that, but it isn't needed insofar as I can see, and is inappropriate in any event. So I think that's the only part of this application that I would oppose. Otherwise, I support it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi? I think she's.
I'm on me.
Okay, great.
Okay. The first thing is I just want to say that I agree it was a very good and thorough presentation, and I appreciate all the comments from the applicants and from everyone who provided comments, and which were all very thoughtful. I also want to actually just say that I commend the applicant for trying to do what they're doing. I mean, taking this office building and trying to convert it into residential at a very difficult time in the marketplace on both sides, actually, where because of COVID and because of the way we work, the demand for us office space has decreased, and there's a supply issue on the residential side. Fortunately, based on the layout of this building and where the elevators are, the core is set up, it looks like it's going to be possible. And I want to wish them the best of luck with this, and it'll be good for them and it will be good for the city, hopefully. I don't have a lot of problems, except that I do think that the canopy for the residential is too heavy. I don't have a problem with the canopy. I think we not only have approved canopies, but I think if this was a lighter canopy and one more like the one that's been proposed for the offices, and if it was aligned properly with the banding, that it could work quite well. This is a pretty deep sidewalk, and it is very, very common for residential buildings to have canopies. So this and residential uses in this building, would make sense. So that would be my comment, that should be redeveloped in a way that makes sense with the original design intention.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with the comments that the canopy is inappropriate, and even if the scale was changed, it doesn't fit in well with this facade. And I think the issue I have is also the door. If the original door was 7 feet, the proposed door that Landmark approved was 8'2", and they want to go to 9 feet. And since we don't have the marquee, we could keep the 8'2" doors. I think 7 feet was a little low, but it's difficult there because it's original and the proportions are so important. But I could go with the 8'2" door.
Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
While I appreciate that the applicant showed us precedent for marquees at entrances on modern and Art Deco skyscrapers, this particular individual landmark, I think I'm in agreement with the commissioners who've already stated this, does not bear that as an appropriate opportunity, even redesigned. So I oppose the canopy. I am okay with the double paired doors at the West Bay. And I think that obviously without the canopy, I think they justified the height of the change in height of the doors by the addition of the canopy. So I wouldn't approve the 9 foot. I think it should go back to the 8'2" or even the 7 if they could.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Well, I think that the 7-foot door would be ideal, I think, and most appropriate. I think enlarging that, opening that is making it more tall and all the way to 9 feet is acceptable. Not the most appropriate, but appropriate still. I do think that the canopy, this one in particular, the main canopy, is inappropriate, undermines the design intention of the building, and should not be accepted or approved.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. I started out initially thinking along the lines that Jeannie has described, that making it skinnier, having it to be more light might work. But the more I look at it, the more I think that the real problem with the marquee is that it kind of takes away from the entrance the initial intended effect of the transparent sign band above it, which was meant to be the kind of transition from the street to that outer vestibule. once you put the marquee there, that sense of enclosure that's created by that flying soffit and the banding and the text is really lost. You won't have that experience. You may see it in an interrupted way through the glass, but you won't have the sense of the filtering, the entry layering that was intended by the original architect. So I think I can agree with the majority at the moment that the marquee is at the main entrance is not an appropriate intervention. I personally don't have a major concern about the raising of the entry doors, but I do think that if they do raise them to a non-historic height, the band should align with the height of the header should align with one of the brass bands and not be kind of random, which is how it looks in this rendering. I have no objections to the office entry as designed, and I do want to congratulate these applicants. This building is now empty, or it seems like it's empty when I look at it every day, and it's a real gem, and it's such an important building in our neighborhood in the city that their restorative efforts, which have so far been fairly extensive, have been really magnificent and important. And I would suggest that even though it's not within our purview to do so, that the lobby should be restored to the greatest extent possible.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, as usual, Michael is so eloquent, and along with the rest of the commissioners, I think it's quite clear that the commission is not deeming the marquee to be appropriate. This is such a historic major building, individual landmark, and by Raymond Hood, the distinguished Raymond Hood, and so I'm in agreement. I also get the sense the majority of the commissioners have trouble with the 9 foot raising to the 9 feet height, and I do agree that if that's the direction to go, they should keep with the previously approved 8'2".
Actually, I think we have a majority okay with raising the height as long as it aligns with a band.
Okay, then I'm fine with that too, because I am like Michael. I have no problem with a couple more inches in that regard. But if the majority wants it that way, so that part is fine. But as for the office entrance, that's fine with me.
Okay. All right. So I think what we can do today is make a motion to approve with some adjustments, the majority of the work except for the main marquee, and we can leave that for them to think about whether there's a different approach they might want to take. So let me go ahead and make a motion here so that they can move ahead with the other aspects of this project, because I do think this is an important project, and it's wonderful that the building is going to have this, multiple uses, and many people will be able to celebrate this important landmark, and I do applaud their careful attention to the design and the details, and having this building be used on multiple levels. So in the matter of docket number LPC 23-05769, 330 West 42nd Street, the McGraw-Hill Building, an individual landmark, a modern international style office building designed by Raymond Hood and Godley and Fu Yu, and built in 1931. This is an application to amend Certificate of Appropriateness 22-04937 to modify entrance, infill, and install signage and marquees. And I recommend approval in part with modifications, finding that, let me skip that, that the okay, let me see, that the removal of historic material to create double paired doors at the westernmost bay within the widened new commercial lobby. Entry is required by code, and the proposed configuration, materials, and details of the infill are in keeping with storefronts throughout the building. That due to the sloping sidewalk, the raised door height at the westernmost bay will visually align with the other storefront bays along the facade, and that the installation of a taller door assembly at the main entrance will retain the materials, finishes, and relationship to the panels surrounding it. However, I recommend that the transom bar align appropriately with the banding, and that adjustment be worked out with the staff. And I find that the overhang at the westernmost entry will not call attention to itself or detract from the composition of the ground floor. All right, and I think that is it. Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
I will second.
Thank you. John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
8 in favor, none opposed. The motion as modified passes.
Thank you. All right, and we'll now move to the next item.
All right, commissioners, the next item is item number 4, docket number 230511, 05001, 392 Columbus Avenue in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District, Borough of Manhattan, Block 1150, Lot 34. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness, a neo-Grec style row house designed by Christian Blinn and built in 1881. The application is to replace storefront windows and install awnings, signage, and lighting.
The commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Jackie, you now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen. And then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record. You may begin.
Hello again, commissioners and landmark staff. Thank you for hearing this application today. Jackie Pudu-Vallon of JPD Preservation Consulting. This is 392 Columbus Avenue, a proposal to make ground floor alterations for a new restaurant, Waffles and Dingus, including new awnings, windows, light fixtures, and an internally illuminated sign and vinyl signage. I'm here today with Thomas de Geest of the Belgian Ministry of Culinary Affairs and the architect Joran de Schrijver of D&DS Architecture Office. 392 Columbus is a neo-Grec revival style row house in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. It stands on the southwest corner of West 79th Street and Columbus Avenue. Please note that the building is undergoing modest restorative work that has been approved by the commission. So that's why the current condition photos show the building being a sort of cream color at the bottom, excuse me, and gray at the upper floors. And the renderings of the proposed condition are going to show the building in a brown color. That's because the building is being restuccoed by the building owner, and it will replicate the look of brownstone. Here's the ground floor on Columbus Avenue looking north. And here's the existing condition photos of the ground floor on Columbus again, but this time looking south. And on the right side is the north elevation of the ground floor. Here are some historic photos of the building, which show us how this ground floor has significantly been altered over the course of the 20th century. On the left is the 1940s tax photo when it was a restaurant, by which time we see, large window openings had been installed as well as awnings. And by the 1980s, which is the photo in the center, we can see single windows now separated by masonry piers. And on the right is the 1988 designation photo. Here are some zoomed in photos of those images. Again, please note the prominent signage and awnings that were present in the in the early 20th century when this was previously a restaurant. Here is an elevation drawing of the existing north elevation. And here's the proposed north elevation. Here you can see the proposed awning, which would be installed on Columbus. It would be set below a restored string course, which is being installed under the facade restoration. The awning would be retractable in a yellow canvas, projecting 11 foot 6 inches with a loose hanging skirt. Here's an elevation drawing of the existing east elevation. But again, that's the Columbus elevation. And here's the proposed east elevation, Columbus. Here you can see the proposed awnings, which would each be 15 foot 4 inches long to provide a symmetrical treatment of the facade. The proposed windows are tripartite and operable with a dark bronze finish. The windows will fold to open in warmer months to provide fresh air into the restaurant, which is a continuing concern as we move past the pandemic. These windows will also have fixed panels below, aligning with the location of counters beyond them. You can also see the cylindrical light fixtures and the location of the illuminated sign on the wall placed equidistant between the door and to the restaurant and the center window. And here's a rendering of the proposed condition. So again, cylindrical light fixtures with bronze finish placed on the masonry piers, the yellow canvas awnings, retractable, the tripartite windows with fixed panels below, featuring vinyl signage on the fixed panels, the sign, Waffles and Dingus sign on the wall. And now we'll get into some details. So here's an example of how the awning would be constructed. The proposed color for the awning fabric is sunflower yellow by Sunbrella. The proposed light fixtures, of which there would be 7, again, placed on each of the masonry piers, each next to each window and the door. The fixtures dimensions are 18 inches tall, 6 inches wide, and they would project off the building 8 inches. Here are the window details for the folding windows with the fixed panel below, as I said. And again, installed within the existing masonry openings, so there'd be no change to the existing openings. Just more of the details. You can see how the windows will fold to one side rather, and vertical section. And this is the proposed sign, which would be illuminated using the push-through technique. It would be a black metal cabinet with a translucent yellow acrylic projecting through it with an overlay of vinyl, which would allow the sign to just have a gentle glow. The proposed sign is 3 foot 4 inches square. The proposed depth would be 4 inches for the metal cabinet, with a 1 inch projection of the vinyl, of the acrylic past the vinyl cabinet. An example of how the sign will be constructed is on the left. This sign is also a push-through illuminated sign that's now located at the interior of the restaurant. And lastly, here's the proposed vinyl signage decals, which would be in yellow and would be applied to the fixed panels on the windows and to the restaurant door. And to conclude, we think these alterations are modest and appropriate to a building that has seen many alterations to its ground floor over time. The proposed awnings will give some life to this long neglected corner and allow the new restaurant to have additional seating with cafe tables in the warmer months, in a very difficult time still for restaurants to be profitable. The light fixtures are modestly detailed and so would be unobtrusive. The tripartite windows will anchor the building by introducing verticals and horizontal lines to the masonry openings, and so they wouldn't look like voids in the facade anymore. And the illuminated sign would only have a gentle glow at night and therefore would not detract from the facade. And with that, that's our conclusion, and I welcome your comments and questions.
Okay, thank you. We do have at least one question. Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So is there a, can you show us, or have you researched the prevalence of kind of continuous building-wide awnings like this. My recollection of the district is that they tend to be more tucked into or focused over particular show windows. Question one. Question two, the rendering doesn't seem to show it, but the detail did show an aluminum, I guess, bar between the vertical component with the signage and the angled component of the actual cover. Is that the intention? And if so, why here where one tends not to see that kind of thing elsewhere?
Okay, hold on. You're asking about this detail on the awning?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the architect to address that question. Yaron, are you present?
Hi, hello, commissioners. This is Jerome the Shriver. The intent is what's shown on the rendering. This is the image we got from our vendor or canopy vendor, but the intent is what's on the rendering. So if you could go back to that image, then it's not intent to have like a white metal band there.
So we should judge this based on the rendering and not based on the image that we just saw before this one.
Correct. It should. Yes.
Great. Thank you. And Jackie, could you address the issue of the continuity and the kind of extent of the canopy?
It's more of a design issue as well as a seating issue. Because of the placement of the windows, it's an atypical condition. It's not your typical storefront condition you'd find on a historic building where you have a typical storefront opening and you have a defined space where you would then place the awning directly over that defined storefront opening, right? So then the question becomes, how do you treat this? Do you try to have let me go to the elevation. Do you try to have separate awnings that are just over a few windows and then you've got, let me go back to the bigger elevation. Okay, so rather than having, say, an awning spanning the group of 3 windows and then the one window or the window and the door combined, the idea was that would look very strange and asymmetrical. So rather than do that, the idea was to have one almost a continuous expanse of awnings that would be more centered and hopefully looking proportional to the facade. And to answer your other question, no, I did not find other examples where there was an analogous treatment of a facade condition like this with continuous awnings.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. De Geest, are you part of the applicant team?
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm
yes?
the owner.
Okay.
If I can help with the commissioner's question, if you go 2 blocks down on the northeast corner of Columbus and 77, and you look at the awnings of La Picora Bianca, they are continuous along the entire Columbus Avenue side as well. Just to give you one example. So I understand it may not be very prevalent, but there are definitely instances, for instance, this one, if that helps.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
A question on detail on page 8, the string corset that you have running around, is the awning below the string corset? And the here you see the awning is below the string corset.
Yes, Commissioner.
Can you have and the perspectives and the renderings, they're on the where on the top of awning is on the corset itself. Can you go to the rendering in page 10? You see, where is the awning head? On above the corset or below the corset, the string corset?
The rendering is, showing the proposed height, the location of the awnings. It's just not showing the string course. Why don't I have ask Jerome to address that as well, please?
Yes, so the string course is slightly shown there, which is taken from the approved LPC drawings of the facade restoration. During conversations with LPC, they asked us to make the string wider, which we have done on the, if you go back to the section drawing or the elevation drawing, you'll see that. The string courses are not part of our scope, and we're happy to, accommodate any height that's there. So this is the number that we came up with. So, so to answer your question, the awnings sit below the string corset.
Okay, good, thanks. So the rendering is slightly off. Okay, thank you.
Right, so the rendering doesn't show the actual facade work yet. Got it, okay. Other questions? Okay, let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I'll turn it over to Gregory Collin to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of signups beforehand, so we will be moving through those first. The first sign up is Megan Fitzpatrick from Landmarks West. So Megan Fitzpatrick, I'm promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. Megan Fitzpatrick for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is glad to see this landmark getting some much deserved attention, and we welcome another business to the district. Possibly the most neglected retail storefront in the district, and although this is not a true restoration, we believe the proposed changes offer a welcomed improvement which would benefit the retail corridor. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee hopes this inspires the owner to commit to a more comprehensive restoration in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And next up, we'll be hearing from Christina Conroy from VSNY. So Christina Conroy, I am promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, we recommended a few revisions to the storefront alteration proposal. While we are happy to see work done at this part of the building, the design can and should do more to restore the dignity and sense of proportion to the street level facade. The bright orange awning located so high in the facade and stretching across nearly its entire length will be far too prominent for the building and streetscape. We suggest lowering the awning to be more in line with the tops of the windows. To balance the design, a sign band above the awning would recall the 1940s tax photo and is the traditional way to configure signs and awnings on storefronts. The sign band would provide clarity that this is a business and separate from the otherwise residential building. We also suggest that the awning be broken up into 2 or more sections, reflecting the configuration of the shop windows below. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina Conroy. And I am looking through our attendees and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 7 recommends approval. Thank you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think Landmarks West and Community Board 7 recommend approval, but the Victorian Society did have some questions or comments about the extent of the awning. So Jackie or team, would you like to respond to those?
Yes, I would just like to briefly respond regarding the placement of the awnings. Their placement, their height is compliant with zoning. In reference or DOB requirements rather, referring to the 1940s photo for signage in this case, I don't think would really make sense because everything else that was in the 1940s condition is not there anymore. There was an assembly of what looked like a mainly glass storefront, much larger openings with bulkheads that were some type of shiny material, maybe also glass with some kind of treatment behind it. So, we don't have analogous conditions anymore. We have what we're left with, which is a much later alteration where we now have these very square and plain window openings separated by masonry piers. But having said that, we do want to have awnings back, and the question becomes, how do you do that with providing some balance and symmetry to the facade, so that you don't have a strange placement of awnings and off balance placement of awnings. So our solution to that is to have an almost continuous line of awnings. Jerome, would you like to add anything to that?
Not that much. I mean, as Jackie said, we're left over with a really tortured facade, and in order to create a sense of unity, adding 3 canopies, which are high enough so people don't hit their head, and wide enough so we can have enough space underneath to create outdoor seating, is what we're looking for to accomplish. And then we brought them lower in order to create a band on the top below the windows. All the other work is facade work is not part of our scope. So in our ideal world, the whole facade would be restored to original conditions, but that's not where we're at, unfortunately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I think we can all begin to unmute so that we can move to our discussion. And Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So as we've heard, this is a heavily altered building with this new business going in, and they are asking for approval for new windows within existing modified existing openings that are not the original storefront openings, but are the existing openings that they're working with. The installation of awnings that would span those openings and that facade, and then the installation of the sign in between the openings that's somewhat, I guess, akin to like a menu box, but it's a metal cabinet with a push-through sign, and then letters within the windows. So we'll begin our discussion, and Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I appreciate the applicant's point about the fenestration of this of the storefronts has changed so dramatically since the original that it really makes it difficult to figure out how to allocate the awnings and relate them to the window arrangement. So I'm okay with the continuous nature of it. It would be terrific if they could figure out a way to deal with the thing that strikes me more than that, which is the color of the awnings. It is, I don't know that it's part of their branding to be that, vivid. But if they could tone that down, it might actually have some impact on this continuity of the thing. As far as the sign is concerned, I'm fine with that, and the change in the windows, I'm okay with that as well.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yes, I also support the changes in the windows. I could see a little bit of the awning being reduced on the left side to align with the window opening, but actually don't feel it's requisite. It's fine in my mind as presented, and I think this color is in fact very much aligned with the brand of this particular. If in fact this is going to be the tenant, the waffle company, then that is their color, and because of that, I think whatever their color is, they should be allowed to use that on this awning.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I tell you, I have trouble with this one. I feel that my understanding of this district is that the canopies are not continuous. This to me has the feel of a marquee or a loading dock type awning that one would find in meatpacking district or in other locations where you have a continuous facade shaded by a very deep awning or marquee. I think that here it just feels inappropriate to me, and I understand the functional impetus behind it, but for me it just feels alien to the district. I would suggest that they limit the awnings to the group of 3 windows on one side and the window and door on the other, and have the ends of the canopies align with the outer edges of those windows. I do not have any difficulty with the color.
Okay. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, just like Michael, this is a tough one for me. I understand the plight of the applicant, but I think that I would defer to the rest of the commission to how they feel about this case.
Commissioner Bland?
Well, this is an easy one for me. I love it as it is. And why do I love it? I think partly because, and I would suggest anybody who doesn't know Van Gogh's great painting, The Cafe Terrace in Arles, go look at it. It's exactly this color. It's exactly this encompassing length over a series of discordant windows. It couldn't be more perfect. And if anybody's been able to eat under that wonderful canopy, I urge you to think about it here. The analogy of the Upper West Side and Arles may be a little difficult to manage, but I like it exactly as it is, and I think it's very appropriate.
Thank you. I do think that, with Columbus Avenue, most of the buildings have actual storefronts, large openings. And so I think that's why it's very typical to have storefront awnings of conform and align with those storefronts. Here, we don't really have big storefronts, and I think we can think about this building a little bit differently. And a continuous awning could be in keeping with the commercial character of the district, and for me, I think doesn't stand out as unusual because you don't have storefront openings to align it with. I'm sort of thinking that there was I think the owner mentioned a building at another building where we might have approved it. I think we maybe at 77th Street and Columbus Avenue also approved something, but where there were very modified arched openings, we approved something continuous over it. Yes, Commissioner Bland.
Sorry, I got so carried away with my analogy that I forgot to really focus on the fact that this canopy actually unifies to some degree the windows below it, as opposed to the other way around, which we're normally used to seeing. So I think it makes a unity of the wall of the building that the storefronts themselves do not do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
So I agree with what Fred just said, that about the canopy unifying the windows below it. And I mean, I'm thinking also that it's not unusual in places, food settings, for there to be large canopies that people can sit under, especially now more and more people are eating outside in it. So I'm okay with it. I think the windows are fine. I don't know if we are saying anything about the sconces, but I think that they're good now that we understand exactly where the canopy is placed. The placement makes sense to me. The size makes sense. I am very familiar with that sunbrella yellow color. And I would like to say that I think it is very bright, and I would suggest that the applicant work with staff. And it looks like black is also part of their logo, and that might be a more appropriate color or just something else to explore.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Jefferson?
I think it's totally appropriate. I think it unifies the whole facade, and I love the color. I think it's very good.
Okay. All right. So we have three, I think, who think it's totally appropriate, including the color, and two that would support it, but with a toned down color. So Commissioner Chan, I'm going to just circle back to you and see what you're thinking at this point.
I think since Fred put it so eloquently, I'm going to side with Fred.
Oh dear.
Okay, so 2, 3. Okay, so I think 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there are still only 5 of us who would support it as is. And so I guess Commissioner Lutfi and Gustafson, do you feel very strongly about the color? Do you feel that we should?
I would not fall on my sword on the color.
Okay, all right. So I think we can. Okay, well, that will get us to 6. All right, that would be
Is
great.
that standard nowadays? Is that the benchmark? Yeah.
I was being literal.
I know. I assumed so.
Oh,
Ouch.
wow. Whoa.
Okay, so if you're comfortable with that, Commissioner Gustafson, would you make the motion?
Yeah,
And
sure.
to approve it as is. Great.
Right. In the matter of LPC 23-05001, 392 Columbus Avenue on the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District, the application is to replace storefront windows and install awning signage and lighting. I note that the building's scale, style, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the base of the building was highly altered prior to the designation of the historic district. Therefore, the work will not eliminate or conceal any significant historic fabric, that the windows will be installed at openings that were altered prior to the designation of the district, that the window assemblies featuring operable and fixed black finished metal windows will be simply designed and well scaled to the masonry openings and well integrated into the design of the existing modern storefront in terms of materials, details, and finishes, helping the installations to remain a harmonious secondary presence within the streetscape, that the material slopes and loose skirts with signage of the awnings will be in keeping with historic characteristics of traditional awnings found in buildings of this type, age, and style. That the size and type of the awnings will not compete with the simplified details of the building and will relate to the commercial character of Columbus Avenue, that the internally illuminated sign featuring a solid metal and acrylic panel with a vinyl overlay will be modest in terms of area of illumination and will be in keeping with the commercial character of Columbus Avenue, that the installation will not include exposed conduit or junction boxes, that the cumulative amount of signage will not overwhelm the building or the streetscape, that the proposed sconces will be small in size, simple in design, typical in terms of placement and finish, and will not call undue attention to themselves, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
No.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
7 in favor, 1 opposed. The motion passes.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. All right, so that concludes our morning session. We will now break for lunch and we will return at 1:30 for the remaining items on our agenda. So we will ask all members of the public to exit the meeting at this time. And please do so voluntarily, because if we have to remove you, you may have difficulty returning, technical difficulties returning. And so if you do wish to return, it's best to just exit voluntarily at this time and rejoin the meeting at 1:30. So we'll see everybody in a half an hour. Thank you.